the two cars sped through the dark night. The car in front was like a panicked rabbit running away from a pack of ferocious wolves, as if one moment of carelessness would result in being swallowed up and nothing left. Tonight was the wedding night. Yi Ranran had only met her newlywed husband once at the wedding. No matter how she imagined it, she would never have expected that the powerful man in K country would choose her to marry instead of her charming and graceful older sister. This shocked her, and her choice also shocked the world around her. The howling wind seemed to tear the small car apart. The car behind seemed to have received the order, and the formation of Maybachs gradually surrounded her tightly. In the rearview mirror, Yi Ranran saw Gu Jin's cold figure and perfect face. Gu Jin was about to grab her. Perhaps if she escaped just a little further, Gu Jin would lose interest in her. But no, he became more and more ferocious. The headlights of the cars behind became more and more fierce, rushing straight forward. A Maybach suddenly accelerated like a ferocious wild beast, charging straight towards her car. In an instant, a piercing screech tore through her eardrums. The two cars were only a fist's distance apart, almost colliding. Yi Ranran was tightly held by the seat belt, her small face pale, her body trembling non-stop. The flashing lights revealed the man's handsome face. The almond eyes filled with fear met his sharp gaze. Gu Jin raised his gun, an evil smile on his lips. Bang! Game over. Her car was tightly surrounded by the convoy behind. Crazy! Fear enveloped her, feeling as if her neck was being squeezed by a poisonous snake, her almond eyes filled with tears as she stared at the man. The security guard wore a black suit, leather shoes, and an umbrella, standing on both sides, to clear the way. The man slowly got out of the car. The lights flashed in the dark night, a tall, cold figure walked over. His eyes were filled with majesty. The light highlighted his sharp, angular face, the perfect suit hugged his tall body. He stretched out his strong arms like a victor. Come here, Neem Neem. Go back to your husband, and you will receive punishment. The sound of the wind whistling against the glass door, creating terrifying noises. Ko Tan wiped away the tears from the corner of the girl's eyes, his evil eyes curved slightly, revealing an ambiguous smile. Will you obediently return to your husband? His voice was hoarse like the whisper of a devil in his ear. The little girl in his arms was like a small cat, exhausted and unable to resist. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with fear. Neem Neem bit her lips, swallowing the words that went against her heart. Her voice was weak and trembling as if she was about to collapse. I will be good. Gu Jin curled his lips into an evil smile, his hoarse voice pressed close to her ear. What did you say? I didn't hear clearly, say it again? Ranran closed her eyes tightly, not daring to look at the evil person in front of her. Her heart trembled, her cheeks flushed red with panic. Chapter 2. Except for Gu Jin, every corner of the room was filled with dresses and other items specifically for women. The wardrobe was filled with dresses of all styles, even underwear had been prepared, each item was the right size for her. Ranran stood there, stunned, her eyes filled with astonishment. Even though the labels hadn't been removed, it was as if they had been here for a long time, waiting for her to become the female lead in the life of a sick male lead. It felt like this wedding was predetermined, with no way back. She bit her lip, not daring to think any further, hastily choosing a pair of pants that were easy to move in to prepare to escape. Outside, two tall female housekeepers blocked the way. No matter what Ranran said, their attitudes did not change, bowing their heads and repeating the same sentence over and over again. I'm sorry, miss, without the young master's permission, you cannot leave here. What right do you have? You guys are breaking the law by locking me here. Let me go. Her delicate face was flushed with anger, her almond eyes glistening with tears. But no matter what, the two women in front of her were still like two unshakable walls. Returning to the luxurious room, Ranran sat down on the bed, took out a pillow, hugged it tightly, and buried her face in it, sobbing. After a while of crying, she sat up, looking around the room with sharp eyes. Her almond eyes were filled with determination. Must escape. Meow. The small meow of a cat rang out outside the window, immediately attracting Ranran's attention. That cry was like a ray of light that lit up her heart. Gujin didn't keep any cats in the villa, so this cat. Ran Ran's bright eyes flashed, a rare smile appeared on her face, two dimples faintly appearing. She quickly walked to the window, trying to find the strange cat. On a drainpipe outside, a fat cat was climbing up, leaving small paw prints on the surface. Thank you, cat. Ran happily waved at the cat through the glass, her eyes sparkling like stars. Knowing that in this villa, every maid had her own duties and no one would dare to interfere if she ran away, Ran quickly acted. She carefully climbed onto the windowsill, grabbed the drainpipe, and started to climb down. Everything was planned, the plane ticket was booked. As long as she escaped from this place, she would leave immediately. In the Maybach parked in the yard, Gujin had just returned, one hand holding a cigarette, his face was even more hazy from the smoke. Inside the bag, he brought back a bottle of medicine to treat the pain. It was all because he was afraid that she would be uncomfortable, so he specially went to buy it. But when his eyes swept over the drainpipe outside the villa, he immediately saw Ran's petite figure, struggling to climb down. His sharp eyebrows immediately furrowed, his lips curled into an icy smile. Running away again? Baby, how can I let you go? The cigarette in his hand was broken, the hot ash fell onto his fingers, but Gujin didn't care at all. Under his gaze, Ran looked like a silly little koala, clinging tightly to the drainpipe and climbing little by little. The air seemed to be suffocated by the anger rising in his heart. Humph, it seems you're quite persistent. The corners of Gujin's lips curled into a terrifying smile, his heavy footsteps echoed on the ground, creating a reverberating sound filled with pressure. Gujin slowly walked towards the girl who was trying to climb down the drainpipe to escape. With each step he took, his sharp eyes became more and more dangerous. How reckless. Without any protection, she dared to climb down like this. What if she accidentally slipped and fell? Did she no longer care about her life? Coldly observing, his heart was filled with anger, his eyebrows furrowed tightly, and a terrifying cold air was emitted from his body. The surrounding air seemed to be frozen. Ran still tried to cling to the water pipe, moving down little by little. The distance to the ground was still far, but her eyes accidentally met the cold, predatory eyes of the man below. Gujin was wearing a branded suit, his tall and strong body, his long legs were hugged by tight pants, highlighting his strong beauty. The sunlight shone on his angular face, adding to his handsome but also oppressive appearance. His perfect face with sharp eyebrows, cold thin lips, his whole body exuded a noble aura but also carried a dangerous aura that made others not dare to approach. His eyes, like an icy flame, stared at her. Ah! Ran was already very afraid of being discovered. When she saw Gujin's terrifying eyes, her reason was immediately overwhelmed by fear. She trembled and let go of the water pipe, falling down. Gujin immediately frowned, quickly walking towards her. A loud thud sounded. Ran fell to the ground. Fortunately, she only fell from a not-so-high height, so she wasn't seriously injured. However, her ankle was sprained, and the pain was so great that she couldn't stand up right away. She gritted her teeth, not daring to delay even for a second, immediately dragging her injured ankle to escape. She knew clearly that if she was caught, this crazy man would definitely torture her without mercy. Behind her, Gujin watched her small figure trying to escape, his cold eyes mixed with a hint of amusement. He smiled faintly, his expression as if he was watching an interesting pastime. Want to escape? Fine. With just 2 long steps, he easily shortened the distance between them. Gujin lowered his head to look at the little girl with eyes filled with intimidation, his low voice rang out, "Baby, your courage is getting bigger and bigger. You dare to do anything, right?" Gujin smiled dangerously, his voice low but cold. Ran angrily pushed him away, her big round eyes shining with hatred. That's right. I don't want to be with a crazy person like you. Gujin slightly raised his chin, his sharp eyes darkened. Then fine, let's see who has to be with who now. Ah. Not giving her time to resist, his icy cold hand wrapped around her knee, with just one force he easily lifted her over his shoulder. Crazy. Let go. Let me go. Ran Ran struggled frantically, using both hands to hit his strong shoulder. She even bit his shoulder until blood flowed out, but this man didn't react at all. Her helplessness made her fall into despair, her small face was covered in tears, her weak hands punched his back. Gu Jin, please let me go. You can have any type of woman you want, why does it have to be me? Her choked voice caused a trace of heartache to flash through his eyes, but immediately after, he became even colder. His steps quickened, his voice carrying a faint smile. Let me go? Behave yourself, or else don't blame me for keeping you in my arms forever. Chapter. Gu Jin, you're crazy. Let me go. Ran Ran's screams mixed with the loud noise of the helicopter flying in the air. She clung tightly to the side of the plane, her eyes filled with fear as she looked down at the ground thousands of meters away. Ran Ran trembled, cold sweat pouring down her body. This was the first time she felt Gu Jin's ultimate fear. He was a complete lunatic, and that madness scared her to the core. Gu Jin stood against the wind, his handsome face like an arrogant yet evil god. His sharp eyes flashed with a flash of hurt, but it was quickly hidden by a cold smile. He approached her, his smile filled with cruelty. Ran Ran, baby, who told you to disobey? He tilted his head, his voice filled with sarcasm. You said you wanted to escape? Didn't I say you just need to obediently stay by my side? After a wave of his hand, his men immediately came forward and equipped Ran Ran with a parachute. That's right, Gu Jin had prepared a parachute. At this height of thousands of meters, he wanted to teach her a lesson. Ran Ran was forced to put on the equipment. Gu Jin remained calm as if nothing had happened, his long fingers gently brushing the messy hair on her forehead behind her ear. Look, this is a lesson for you to never dare to escape again. How is it? Can we have fun together today? Ran Ran's big round eyes were filled with surprise and fear, surrounded by the howling wind. Just one more step, and the 1,000-meter gap ahead was endless. The strong wind blew past, making all sounds vague, but facing Gu Jin's dangerous gaze, Ran Ran felt even more terrifying than the terrifying height before her eyes. The word crazy was no longer enough to describe this man. She felt her legs were as heavy as lead, and the blood in her body seemed to freeze. Ran Ran secretly wondered, why did I provoke a crazy person like him? Without hesitation, Gu Jin quickly attached the two sets of parachute equipment together. Of course, he wouldn't leave her alone. He brought his little wife along with him. He put the goggles on the bridge of his nose, carefully checking every detail of her outfit, his large hands wrapped around Ran Ran's small hands. Then, he coldly pulled the latch of the compartment door, letting the fierce wind rush in. The howling wind whistled past her ears, Neem Neem's long hair was blown away. The sound of the helicopter's blades seemed to tear the air apart, but Gu Jin didn't hesitate. He held her tightly in his arms, leading her to jump straight down from 1,000-meter high. His lips curled up, a smile mixed with cold blood and animalism. Be good, we will enjoy this together. Ah! Ran Ran screamed in despair, her voice was swept away by the wind. The two of them fell together in the air, feeling like a sharp blade cutting through their skin. She closed her eyes tightly, her two hands clinging to him as if clinging to a life-saving straw, her entire body trembling non-stop. Gu Jin, on the other hand, was very calm. He rushed down with the wind, his strong muscles seemed to be carved deep in the air, his entire strong body embracing Ran Ran. His large hands held her tightly, pressing her small body close to him. It was as if in this moment, the world only had the two of them left. The wind was her companion. She lay completely in his arms. Gu Jin's low voice rang out, piercing through the whistling wind. Be good, let's stay like this forever, okay? Ran Ran, be good, we'll be fine. Ran Ran cried, hugging Gu Jin's strong waist tightly, her entire body like a clinging koala, unable to let go. The feeling of losing gravity grew stronger and stronger, making her almost desperate. Realizing that Ran Ran had absolutely no way to open her own umbrella, her delicate face had turned pale without a drop of blood. You're crazy. Let me down. Gu Jin raised his eyebrows, revealing a dangerous smile full of evil. Scaring her? It was just a small punishment, How could he bear to let her really be in danger? His large hand wrapped around her slender waist, holding her tightly. His other hand nimbly pulled the parachute cord. From the state of free fall, the two quickly stabilized in the air. The sun gradually set, the red sunset light shone everywhere, the scenery below appeared vivid and beautiful. The strong winds also calmed down, all around was a magnificent space, the mountains were rolling and the clouds were brilliant like pink silk spread across the sky. Gu Jin gently patted Ran Ran's soft cheeks, his deep voice seemed to contain a rare gentleness. Baby, open your eyes, look. No. Don't open it. Ning Ning trembled, her whole body still curled up, her big round eyes tightly closed, refusing all temptations. Baby, open your eyes. This is the first time, and maybe the only time. His low voice rang in her ears, as if blending with the sound of the wind. Finally, under his determined gaze, Ning Ning trembled and opened her eyes. The scene before her eyes stunned her. The sunset covered the horizon, covering the entire mountain range with a magical beauty. The pink clouds stretched out, intertwined like a watercolor painting. The fear gradually disappeared. Ning Ning was like a deflated balloon, lying still in his arms, no longer having the strength to resist. Her clear eyes were half closed, her long eyelashes trembled slightly. So tired. So tired. Unpleasant memories came flooding back one after another. Since childhood, her parents had always favored her older sister, treating her like a stranger, and in the end, forcing her to marry a crazy man like this. But thinking back, maybe this was a way to escape? Realizing that Ning Ning's body was gradually loosening, Ko Tan immediately tightened his arms. His sharp eyes flashed with panic. Ning Ning, what are you thinking? Hold me tight, do you hear me? Ning Ning. Chapter 3. The patient is just in a panic and her body is a little weak. She will be discharged after getting more supplements and resting for a few days. The doctor looked at the man with a cold face in front of him, his hands clenched into fists, trying to stay calm, and continued, but, perhaps, during this time, the patient cannot bear any more pressure. On the hospital bed, the beautiful girl lay silently. Her delicate face was pale and lifeless, her soft pink lips now turned pale white. The loose hospital gown further accentuated her fragile figure. She was like a broken porcelain doll, lying there, making anyone who saw her feel pity. Gu Jin's eyes softened as he looked at her. He bent down, carefully pulling the blanket over her, his tired face full of worry. He still remembered the moment when he carried her back from the air. The small, soft body in his arms was completely unconscious. He had never been so scared. His trembling fingers touched her cheek, his hoarse voice rang out, "Baby, I was wrong. I promise. I will never skydive again from now on. We won't do anything dangerous anymore, okay?" In the hospital room, the man with a handsome face bent down, his expression unusually sincere, his eyes intently looking at the girl lying on the hospital bed. The words coming out of his mouth carried anxiety and a hint of weakness. The girl's long eyelashes trembled slightly, her fingers curled up under the blanket, but she still didn't say anything. When he left the hospital bed, the man immediately restored his cold, distant appearance. Every step he took exuded arrogance, like a leader, with his black eyes that carried no warmth as he scanned the room. "Get ready." "Yes, sir." "Understood, sir." The two people beside him bowed their heads, their voices respectful and filled with fear, not daring to look straight at him. Gu Jin's large hand with distinct joints gently touched her slender neck, where the butterfly wings of her collarbone were clearly visible. He bit his lower lip lightly, a cold expression flashed across his handsome face, turning his head to look at the doctor who was bowing his head waiting for orders. "How long does it take for her to recover?" Just need to rest for a few days, she can be discharged soon." The doctor kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a towel, his voice trembling with fear. Gu Jin curled his lips into a smile, his originally charming and enchanting smile now had a somewhat terrifying look, like a wild beast waiting for the opportunity to tear its prey apart. This little girl dared to run away, next time she must obediently stay by his side. Ran, be obedient, never leave me. Even if I have to use 1,000 ways, I will make you stay. Don't force me to be too cruel. His deep eyes seemed to be tinged with ink, full of mystery. When his gaze swept over her slender collarbone, the coldness seemed to seep deeper. Gu Jin's tall back gradually disappeared into the hospital corridor. The remaining space was only silence and an invisible sense of oppression that covered every corner. On the hospital bed, Ran slowly opened her eyes. The familiar smell of antiseptic rushed straight into her nose, causing her to frown slightly. But Gu Jin's words just now still echoed in her ears. In terms of appearance, he was the perfect man. Both his status and assets, just choosing one was enough to make anyone envious. If they could be like normal couples, perhaps he really was an ideal husband. But in reality, the bloody truth was still laid out before her eyes. There was only a madman beside her. She would never live with such a person in her entire life, and even more so, she could not forgive him for a few apologies. Ran stealthily pulled out the 4-needle, then shouted loudly into the air, "Is anyone there? Help me!" The hospital room was only separated by a thin door. The girl's weak scream echoed outside, immediately attracting attention. 2 nurses ran over, followed by a man who pushed the door open and entered. When they saw the girl lying on the bed, astonishment was evident on their faces. This was the first time they had seen such a beautiful girl. Her bare face was completely bare of makeup, but it exuded a pure beauty that amazed people. It was not difficult to understand why Gu Jin was so crazy. "Miss, do you need the doctor to examine you further?" Ran gave a faint, weak smile in response to the man. It seemed that she was really in a lot of pain. The smile that had just appeared on her lips quickly disappeared, her delicate eyebrows furrowed tightly as if she was enduring some kind of pain. "Thank you," Ran said softly, then slowly left the hospital bed and followed the other person out. When she went to another hospital room, Ran pretended to drop a glass vase nearby. The sound of the vase breaking immediately attracted the attention of the man standing guard. As soon as he entered to check, he discovered that the hospital bed was empty, the girl's figure had disappeared. Before he could do anything, he was hit hard on the back of his head. The man collapsed, unconscious on the spot. Ran anxiously threw away the stick in her hand, trying to check his breathing to make sure that nothing serious was happening. Then she placed her hand on her chest, her heart pounding with fear. "Sorry. Really sorry." On the monitor screen, the image of a small girl hastily running away appeared. A real storm was about to strike. The lights inside the Gu Corporation building were bright. Outside, passers-by occasionally looked up, their eyes filled with admiration. Who wouldn't dream of working in such a giant corporation? Once you step foot in here, it means you've set foot on the path to wealth. Everyone admired the man at the top of this corporation, a powerful, mysterious, cold, and extremely handsome figure. He was the perfect combination of everything that any man would want to possess, and at the same time the dream of countless girls. In the large office, Gu Jin lazily sat on a chair, his slender hands playing with a valuable signature pen. In front of him, a senior manager was nervously reporting on his work, his voice filled with reserve. Suddenly, the large screen in the office lit up. Gu Jin frowned, his sharp eyes swept across the screen, immediately stopping when he saw the notification, "President Gu, she's missing." Gu Jin turned his head, his cold eyes looking out at the night outside the window. Under the dim light, the butterfly tattoo on his neck looked lifelike, as if it was flapping its wings. Slender fingers loosened the collar of his shirt, the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Ran, it would be good if you were obedient. Why do you have to force me?" It really made people feel heartbroken. The atmosphere in the office suddenly became stifling. Looking at Gu Jin's cold expression, the managers in suits could only lower their heads, not daring to breathe heavily, their hearts trembling uncontrollably. The Maybach rushed through the night, like a madly shot arrow. Gu Jin held the steering wheel with one hand, his eyes were sharp, his cold voice transmitted through the communication device, "Lock down the entire hospital, check all security cameras." His foot stepped hard on the accelerator, the engine roared, tearing through the night. The cat and mouse game officially began. In the hospital, Neem Neem had just successfully escaped, but her beautiful face was now pale and tired, her hands trembling with tension. She knew she couldn't escape easily. The hospital was quickly sealed off, every corner had a team of bodyguards in suits standing guard strictly, not leaving any gaps. Neem Neem's almond eyes were covered in a layer of mist, her small hands clenched tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Perhaps this was her last chance to escape. If she was caught, she would definitely have no more chances. If she fell into his hands, what awaited her was only an endless abyss and painful punishments, making her shiver with fear. Her eyes unconsciously turned to the ceiling, staring at the surveillance cameras. After a few seconds of thinking, she began to move gradually towards the blind spot of the cameras, where they couldn't see. The Maybach sped away like a whirlwind, the tall figure of a man stepped out of the car. Under the dim light outside the hospital, his angular face was clearly visible, exuding a cold beauty. The corner of his lips held an extinguished cigarette, his slender fingers unbuttoned his shirt one by one, revealing his neck with charming lines. His eyes lit up with a cold smile. His smile was charming, but also terrifyingly dangerous. Neem Neem, have you hidden well? My husband is starting to look for you. All the lights in the hospital turned off one by one, darkness enveloped the entire building. The security team and staff monitoring the camera system suddenly fell into a state of panic when the surveillance screen was only pitch black. In a hidden corner, Neem Neem leaned against the cold wall, slowly sliding down. She felt her heart beating violently in her chest. She had cut off the hospital's main control line. However, this wire only controlled the lighting system and automatic doors, and did not affect the patients in the hospital. Her goal was only to keep everyone in the dark, creating an opportunity to escape. Smart. His low voice echoed in the dark space. In the dim light of the corridor, his eyes were filled with hysteria and excitement, like a wild beast stalking its prey. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed clearly in the dark corridor. His leather shoes stepped slowly on the floor, echoing gloomily in the quiet space. The faintly glowing symbols on the corridor walls made the atmosphere even more eerie, cold, and filled with fear. Ran Ran was panting and panicking as she tried to escape, her whole body drenched in sweat, her heart pounding as if it was about to jump out of her chest. She leaned against the corner of the wall, her arms hugging her body, as if only by doing so could she feel a little bit of safety. Falling into a dangerous situation, she secretly crouched low to hide in the corner, and clearly heard the sound of shoes stomping on the floor. Clack dot clack dot clack. The sound was getting closer and closer, step by step approaching her, as if she would be caught in a few seconds. Who was it? Was it Gujin, or a security guard? Or another patient? No matter who it was, the situation was not good. She was even more scared, trying to cover her mouth with her hand to keep from making any noise, tiptoeing deeper and deeper inside. Clack! A soft sound rang out. She retreated to the door of a hospital room behind. In the darkness, without light, Neem Neem could not distinguish what was inside the hospital room. The footsteps got closer and closer, only a short distance away from her. Neem Neem shivered and hid in the corner of the wall. A cold air crawled up her spine, making her shiver. Her eyes were filled with panic, trying to use the weak light to see the situation inside. Ah! In the hospital room, several beds were covered with white sheets. On each bed, there was someone lying, not a breath, as if. All of it created an eerie and quiet atmosphere. Neem Neem's skin was cold, her whole body was trembling. She was just a weak girl, unable to control her fear. After consecutive crises, tears had soaked her soft cheeks. Why? Why did everything force her to this point? What did she do wrong? Tears kept falling. Ran Ran tried to suppress her fear, and once again gently pushed open the door of the ward. At this moment, from a room in the psychiatric ward, a patient with a serious mental illness quietly walked out. Haha! Haha! The dark corridor of the hospital echoed with strange laughter. A man wearing a patient's uniform looked around with an excited expression, like a bird that had just been released from a cage. Drool dripped from the corner of his mouth. The man wore a name tag on his chest, mental patient, Song Chaozhou. Haha. Caught him. Why? Why did you trick me? Why did it have to be you? Why did you steal all my assets? You slut. You slut. Give it back. Ran Ran was strangled to the point of suffocation, the air gradually became thinner. Her two hands struggled to free the rough hands that were tightening around her neck. Her beautiful almond eyes were filled with tears, shining with glistening tears. Am I going to die here? Through the thin curtain, the weak light shone on the man's fierce face. His expression suddenly changed when he saw the girl in front of him suffocating. He quickly let go, his eyes filled with remorse. Wife, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this to you. Please forgive me. He immediately knelt down, slapping himself in the face decisively, looking completely like he was repenting. Ran Ran hugged her neck, coughing violently, her beautiful almond eyes now filled with fear. She was like a kite with a broken string, collapsing to the ground. She didn't know what to think anymore. This man was definitely not normal. Her delicate face was pale, her hands still hugging her neck, trying to utter a few weak words. Her whole body was drenched in sweat, trying to tell herself not to panic. But Ran Ran was very scared. Get out now. Her hoarse voice rang out weakly, trembling in the dark night. She was betting that he would obediently listen. Only then could she lock this hospital room. The man was indeed hesitant, his dark eyes looked at her with a probing look, trying to figure out the meaning of her words. But when Nim Nim was still feeling fearful, he suddenly revealed a strange smile, as if he had understood something. Wife, we haven't entered the bridal chamber yet. Haha. A strong force pulled, Nim Nim didn't have time to react and was dragged away by the man towards the space beside her. Let me go. Save me. The little girl who had been trying to stay calm all this time, finally couldn't take it anymore. Endless fear enveloped her, tears rolled down her pale face. Like a flower swaying in the storm, both pitiful and desperate. In the hallway, the sound of shoes stepping on the wooden floor echoed clearly in the dark night. Gu Jin's eyes were cold and dangerous. The girl's terrified scream seemed to pierce straight into his heart, causing him to speed up his steps. Bang! A loud noise rang out as the door to the hospital room was kicked open by him. The man who was dragging Nim Nim inside was startled by the shocking sound. He let go of her hand, no longer restraining her. He turned his head, facing Gu Jin's sharp, beast-like eyes. The dim light covered the man's face. Nim Nim couldn't see his expression clearly, but Gu Jin could clearly see her tortured appearance. There were painful red marks on her neck, traces of being strangled, and painful slaps were clearly visible on her cheeks. She shrank back, her eyes filled with tears, her whole body trembling non-stop. His heart tightened, his eyes turned to the girl, his cold and cruel voice rang out, exuding a pressuring aura. Don't be afraid, your husband is here. Bastard. Go away. She's my wife. The man roared indignantly, charging straight at Gu Jin. Gu Jin clenched his tongue lightly, tilting his head. The veins on his neck became more obvious, his strong shoulders filled with intimidation. He grabbed the wooden stick beside him and swung it hard at the man's head. Slap. The man who was hit screamed in pain, staggering to the ground. He raised his hands to hold his head, his eyes filled with fear, his mouth stammering, blood. Blood. Gu Jin walked step by step closer, squatting down in front of him. One hand propped up his knee, the other hand held a cigarette. The red light from the cigarette became the only source of light in the room. His face was highlighted by the light of the cigarette, his sharp features became even more dangerous. He took a breath, his dark eyes flashed with coldness, like a predatory beast filled with murderous intent. His two fingers clamped the burning cigarette, pressing it hard against the man's skin. Tell me, did you only touch one hand? Or did you dare to touch her with both hands? AAA. The man screamed miserably, his face distorted with pain, stammering in fear, No. I didn't touch your wife. As Ran Ran gradually lost consciousness, she only felt Gu Jin's strong arms holding her. The cigarette smoke still lingered around him, his hoarse but gentle voice rang in her ears. I told you, as long as you're good, no one will hurt you anymore. Ran Ran's consciousness gradually faded. Before she completely fainted, she only had time to flash a trace of helplessness. Chapter 4. The sunlight passed through the large window, shining down on the girl. Her delicate face still had a bit of a tired look, but the bruises on her neck had been applied with medicine, clearly much better. The soft lips were now rosy. She looked like an exquisite doll lying obediently on the bed. Feeling the familiar mattress, Ran couldn't help but sigh. Busy for half a day, she finally returned to this luxurious iron cage. With no strength left, she pulled the blanket over herself, realizing that everything had been replaced. Gujin. She hid in the blanket, resentfully clutching the edge of the blanket. The blanket that she had originally pulled closed was gently pushed away. A maid stood by the bed, her eyes flashed with surprise, then she couldn't help but exclaim in praise, Miss, you are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. She brought a tray of food and placed it in front of Ran. On the tray was a bowl of hot porridge and a few other dishes, the aroma quickly spreading throughout the room. Although Ran was very hungry, she had no appetite at all. Her beautiful eyes stared absent-mindedly at the delicious food, looking like a broken delicate doll, both beautiful and pitiful. The maid seemed to have decided on something, boldly speaking, her voice trembling slightly, Miss, actually you can try to change the way you treat the young master. Ran's lifeless eyes flashed, she looked straight at the maid, as if waiting for an explanation. The maid swallowed, trying to muster up her courage, her voice gradually lowered, the young master will actually be obedient if you are gentle with him. Once, the young master raised a wolf. At first, the dog was very ferocious, he tried all means to tame it, but, until the dog realized that it could never escape from the young master, it began to become docile. And from that moment, the young master gradually lost interest in it. Then where is that wolf now? Ran's eyes lit up, looking intently at the maid. It was released. The maid lowered her head, fearfully retreating, leaning against the wall, patting her chest to calm herself down. She looked at Ran with a guilty gaze, thinking to herself, I'm sorry, miss. The maid reported, young master, I have told miss what you told me to do. Receiving the message, Gujin's deep eyes revealed a faint smile. Her fingers with distinct knuckles caressed the wolf that was obediently lying at her feet. Ran, my husband is looking forward to seeing your obedient appearance. Ugh. The wolf that was originally fierce, seeing the smile on its master's lips, became afraid, shrinking its neck. Don't be too afraid. If master always keeps this smile, gradually taming you, will you be obedient? Ran tried her best to swallow all the food on the table. Her beautiful eyes gradually lit up, the butterfly-shaped necklace gently swayed with her every movement. As long as Gujin was interested, wait until he got bored, she would be free. Time passed quickly, the sunset sky changed from bright red to light gray. The clouds were like silk carpets spread across the sky, the scenery was so beautiful that it was mesmerizing. The man placed a light kiss on the girl's white forehead, the cigarette smoke lingering around made her unable to avoid it. Ran's eyes flashed with a hint of evasion. Remembering what the servant said, she struggled to form a vague smile. Be good. Be good. Be good. Gujin lowered his eyes, looking at Ran's fake smile, his heart couldn't help but feel disgusted. He walked past her, not saying a word. Ran cheered in her heart, disgusting. Disgusting. Yeah. Gujin stopped, turned around, bent down, and said hoarsely, behave yourself. Without any concealment, his blunt words caused Ran's delicate face to pale slightly. He was truly a madman. She still hadn't completely gotten over the trauma from last time, her heart was filled with resistance. Gujin propped himself up on the bed, his deep black eyes filled with delight as he looked at the girl in his arms. The butterfly necklace around her neck made her even more mysterious. The corners of his lips curled up, his strong hand caressing every line of her beautiful face. Ran, do you understand? You have no right to refuse. Be a good girl. In the dark night, a few bird calls occasionally echoed. Seeming to have made a decision, the girl closed her eyes tightly, nodding slightly. It's okay, Ran. Just consider it as being bitten by a dog. I must get rid of this madman. I will never see him again. The quiet room echoed with the man's deep laughter, as if he was playing the zither in the dark. Ran, be good. The night was long. In the following days, every time he saw Gu Jin, his eyes looked at her like a wild beast looking at its prey, full of fear. Ran lay on the bed, suspecting in her heart that she had been deceived by the servant. At first, she only wanted to exchange for a fleeting dislike, but now, every time she was obedient, it seemed to stimulate his attention even more. Her hands clenched tightly, her entire body seemed to freeze. She would never forget the cruel and bloodthirsty gaze of the man in front of her. Why would an unrelated servant dare to risk offending Gu Jin? The sunlight shone everywhere, but Ran still felt the cold seeping into her bones, causing her body to shiver uncontrollably. The blanket was pulled tight. She saw the servant again. Ran's eyes were looking into the distance, still looking down, while the servant hurriedly placed the food on the table in front of her. Wait. Is there anything else, miss? The servant tightly grasped the corner of her skirt, afraid to look straight. It seems. I heard that Gu Jin once released the wolf. The girl's voice was soft, but like a sharp knife, stabbing straight into the bottom of her heart. It's also possible that it regretted it, so it came back. Once again, Ran's eyes were looking up at the ceiling. The servant had already left. What obedience? What submission? It's all fake. It's all fake. She turned her head to look at the crimson sunset that covered the sky, as beautiful as a painting painted with brilliant watercolors. Ran lay on her side, her eyes seemed to contain some kind of plan. If she had to be obedient, then go with the flow, be perfectly obedient. The Maybach glided into the villa. Gu Jin in a luxurious suit got out of the car, taking long strides inside. The tightly closed bedroom door was pushed open. The room was immersed in darkness without the lights on. The space seemed to be covered by a terrifying silence. After his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Gu Jin's handsome face revealed a terrifying coldness. His hands clenched tightly at his side, his eyes stopped on the blanket that was pulled tightly on the bed. TSK, I clearly said it, why do you like to challenge my limits like this? Baby, if I catch you again, I will really break your legs. Announcement, from now on, all roads, waterways, and airways are blocked. Gu Jin's fingers gently stroked the butterfly necklace around his neck. There was still a trace of her scent on it, igniting the deep repression in the bottom of his heart. As he turned around, a light scent of cake wafted to the tip of his nose. Gu Jin's eyes drooped, a strange light flashed in his sharp gaze, but quickly disappeared. Hi. Gu Jin. The girl's sweet voice rang out. Ran smiled gently, holding the exquisite cake in her hand, slowly walking out from the darkness, in the gentle light like an angel. Gu Jin glanced at the candle on the cake and the girl standing behind it. Her deep eyebrows furrowed slightly, as if probing. The door is locked from the outside. Because the cake is too big, I'm afraid of being discovered, so I want to create a surprise. The girl's voice was gentle, obedient, without any panic. Her clear eyes looked straight at him, sparkling with the light from the candle, reflecting a sweet smile. Gu Jin's Adam's apple moved slightly. He slowly walked closer to her, hovering around the sweet cake. When he faced her directly, his low voice was full of danger. So good, I thought you ran away again. Ran tried to endure the pain in her hand, raised her head to look at him with clear eyes, her voice obedient. Run away? No, Ran obediently stays by her husband's side. Really good. His low voice finally mixed with a bit of joy. His clenched hand loosened, but his eyes were still coldly following the frightened expression of the girl in front of him. Just now, she really had some intention of escaping. Either he was starting to get bored with this game of chasing. Or. Gu Jin lazily leaned back in his chair, raised his eyebrows to look at her, his fingers gently beckoned, interrupting her train of thought. Yes. Give it here. Neem Neem carefully placed the cake on the tea table. The candle was still burning brightly, the dancing flames reflecting on her cheeks. Both cheeks were red and full of vitality. What are we going to do today? Gu Jin frowned, his sharp eyes looking at her, like a predator in the dark night. Celebrate us. Neem Neem was not lying. This was indeed the plan that the servant had suggested to her. Gu Jin seemed to be not very satisfied with her answer, his hand clenched tighter. Neem Neem quickly realized the situation, quickly pushed the cake with the burning candle in front of him, his voice gentle. First blow out the candles and make a wish. Good child, wishes are only for those who cannot control their own fate. As for me, I will take it all. Power, fame, status, and you. Everything he wanted, was taken by him. Gu Jin propped his chin up, his sharp eyes looking at the girl in front of him. It seemed like he didn't miss the confusion and disappointment that flashed across her face. He frowned slightly, pushed the cake aside, and closed his eyes as if recalling the image of his wish in his memory. Humph, then I wish that Neem Neem would stay by my side forever. Neem Neem lowered her head, her bright eyes sparkling as she looked at the man in front of her. Her long eyelashes drooped down, hiding the emotions in her eyes. Her nose was straight and high, her eyebrows were sharp, his whole person was like a mysterious and proud painting that made others not dare to approach. But this man had a terrifying stubbornness that made people suffocate, made people afraid. The candle was blown out, the room was plunged into darkness. Neem Neem was about to turn on the light when a strong arm hugged her. She screamed in horror, his hoarse voice rang out beside her, "Tonight, what is your gift?" A deep voice rang out beside her, like a glass of fine wine that made people intoxicated. "I will set you free." At that moment, Neem Neem raised her head, her beautiful eyes filled with disbelief. The dim light shone on his angular face. Really? Just now he had suspected that she had escaped, now he said he would let her go? Neem Neem tried to hide the complexity in her heart, her voice obedient. Neem Neem didn't escape. Just need to keep a stable mind when facing such a crazy person. At night, the man's low laughter rang out beside her. Good girl. Just now, for a moment he really wanted to let go, but it was only a fleeting moment. Her smile at this moment seemed to interest him. Ever since he had imprisoned her by his side, he had never seen her smile like that. Even when she cried, she looked more natural. Ran Ran, smile at your husband. You're really sick. Ran Ran tried to suppress her anger, forcing a fake smile. Hee hee, hee hee, hee hee. So ugly, stop laughing. Ran Ran, you're really abnormal. Gu Jin hugged the little girl in his arms, his voice hoarse. Ran Ran, as long as you don't run away and obediently stay by your husband's side, you can do whatever you want. Ran Ran thought to herself, sorry, with a crazy person like you, I just want to run away. Really? Okay. Almost as soon as the words fell, Gu Jin's voice rang out without hesitation in the room. Ran Ran almost couldn't believe her ears. This pervert with an extreme controlling mindset agreed to let her be free. Gu Jin raised his head, looking into her eyes that were as bright as the stars at night. The corners of his lips curved into a smile, making his beauty even more enchanting. Ran Ran's smile instantly froze. She mechanically kissed the cake. Gu Jin's eyes darkened, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Then he turned around and hugged her tightly. Rules. A few days later, Ran Ran was finally able to return to school. Looking at the lush green trees in front of her, she couldn't help but smile happily. It felt like she had just been released after a long time of imprisonment. What should have been a normal freedom had now become a luxury. Today, she came to register for the new school year, and would quickly return home. Her name, her status, everything was still the same. Originally, she planned to study abroad after graduation to continue her education. But with the current situation, she could only speed up the plan. Leaving the teacher's office, the sunlight filtered through the leaves and shone on her face. Ran Ran finally let out a gentle smile. Ran Ran submitted her request to transfer to another academy, and the waiting time for approval was 1 semester. She even specifically asked the instructor to keep it a secret, not even letting her older sister know. Because if her older sister knew, then her parents would definitely know too. At that time, if this was her last chance to escape from Gujin, then she would have no way to escape. Looking up at the deep blue sky, this was the first time Ran Ran felt a little hopeful. As long as she could get through this period of time, let Gujin truly believe that she had escaped. At that time, she would be able to escape abroad. She didn't believe that no matter how powerful Gujin was, he would be able to reach out to a foreign land. In the schoolyard, the girl with the exquisite and beautiful face always had a sweet smile. The gentle wind blew through her long hair, the sunlight shone on her radiant face, making everyone around her become a backdrop. Neem Neem was dreaming about escaping from that crazy man, the smile on her lips seemed to be unstoppable. She decided to buy some things to celebrate her upcoming escape from this prison. At that moment, a sharp sword suddenly rushed towards her, like a knife stabbing straight towards her. Too surprised, she did not have time to dodge. In her pupils, the blade became clearer and clearer, as if her whole body was frozen. She raised her hand slightly to block, but at the decisive moment, the blade suddenly changed direction, stabbing to the side. The man holding the sword was a handsome man. He smiled, put away his sword, and looked at Neem Neem with surprise and admiration. "Excuse me. I'm Lam, from the fencing club. If you're interested in fencing, you're very welcome to join our team." Lam stood close to the girl. The more he looked, the more he couldn't take his eyes off her beauty. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly, afraid of scaring the fairy in front of him. Neem Neem was so startled that her heart almost fell out, but her face still held a light, distant smile. "Thank you, but I'm not interested." Lam clearly saw this as an opportunity to strike up a conversation, but Neem Neem flatly refused, walking quickly away without hesitation. Looking at the girl's hurried back, the smile on the young man's face suddenly became gloomy and sharp. Wow! What did I just see? This is the first time a girl dared to refuse the invitation of handsome Lam. The boys in Lam's group came from behind, laughing and teasing. They were all the young masters of the school, they had countless girlfriends, and some of them they couldn't even remember their names. Today, it was supposed to be a shining show as usual, but unexpectedly, as soon as it started, Lam was rejected outright. Looking at the teasing eyes of his friends, the anger in Lam's heart flared up even more. He clenched his teeth, the corner of his lips curled up into a dangerous smile. "Baby, you have successfully attracted my attention." After school, Neem Neem was taken home by the driver. She put her school bag on the shelf, then took out her clothes, and prepared to go to the bathroom. The sound of the door locking rang out as she closed the door. Outside, the smile on Ko Tan's face became gloomy. The light from the phone shone on his face, a trace of cruelty appeared in his eyes. Lin sent a friend request. His finger slid across the screen, looking at the words that appeared coldly. When Ran Ran stepped out of the bathroom, she saw Gujin waiting with a gloomy expression. Fear immediately rose in her heart. Could it be that the friend request was discovered by him? Accepted. The man's low voice rang out, like the sound of a wild beast in the night, full of deadly danger. Ran Ran tried to suppress her panic, her face obediently looking towards Gujin. Before she could get close, the sweet scent from her body after bathing spread, gently wrapping around her. Gujin's hand with distinct joints pulled her back, hugging her tightly, letting her lie completely in his arms. The phone screen was unlocked, showing a friend request notification. Lin? What a cheesy name. Seeing the request, Ran Ran blurted out sarcasm without hesitation. Sure enough, the tense expression on Gujin's face gradually relaxed, but his deep eyes remained as cold as ever. Ran Ran, you've already had someone chasing you since you entered the school, you're really good. Ran Ran, what kind of weird way are you talking? It was just a friend request, luckily nothing else was discovered. Ran Ran immediately raised her little finger. Without hesitation, she pressed the ignore button instead of accept. Gujin looked down at her movements, his big hand gently stroking her small head and soft hair. However, the sharp lines on his face did not diminish in the slightest. Whoever dared to have intentions towards his people would definitely not be able to live in peace. The sunlight shone everywhere. Ran got out of the luxury car, obediently waving goodbye to the driver. After entering the school grounds, the smile on her face gradually faded. She tugged at her collar, her delicate face contorted in annoyance. Crazy. Brother Lin, there she is. She's a fairy. The boys who had been guarding Ran all this time became excited when they saw her. Lin, the leader, quickly fixed his appearance, thinking he was very handsome, then stood right in front of her. Ran saw a person suddenly appear in front of her, almost bumping into his chest. Luckily, she stopped in time, but she felt extremely uncomfortable inside. Seeing this, the surrounding boys all shouted and teased, "The beauty has fallen into her arms. Big brother Lin is really lucky." Lin grinned, turned around and cursed a few sentences to the cheering group of friends, then his greedy eyes fell on Ran again. That's right, the more she looked, the more beautiful she became, like a rose covered in morning dew, alluring but full of thorns. "Little sister, don't be afraid, I don't mean anything. I just want to be friends." Ran finally recognized who he was. It was the person who almost stabbed her with a sword yesterday. She remembered Lin sending a friend request, causing Gu Jin to go crazy yesterday. Ran couldn't help but connect everything together. She slightly furrowed her delicate eyebrows, and replied in a cold tone, "Sorry, I'm not convenient right now." After speaking, she stepped aside, quickly leaving, afraid of being disturbed further. What a fierce wildcat. The boys laughed teasingly when they saw Lam being harshly rejected by her. Looking at the slender figure leaving, Lam's heart was filled with a strong desire to conquer. The fiercer the more interesting. The wilder the more attractive. A wild horse like that must be tamed. Neem took advantage of some free time today to handle some things, making sure that she didn't miss any messages from Khotan. She also carefully announced some necessary things, hoping that no one would suspect anything. Looking at the clock and seeing that it was late, she quickly sped up to return to the campus. "We meet again, beautiful." Lam raised her two hands to block her face, her eyes flashing with teasing. Neem intended to go around him, but Lam deliberately stepped forward, continuing to block her path. "Just wanted to get to know each other. Not interested." Ran's cold reply made her eyes even sharper. But even in this situation, her appearance still maintained a gentleness, making others unable to look away. A Maybach slowly drove in. Ran was blocked, and Lin stood in her way, his eyes mercilessly looking at her from head to toe, accompanied by disgusting words, "Beauty, don't be afraid. I really just want to get to know her, I won't do anything bad." He even raised a thumb, grinning wickedly, making Ran feel nauseous. "Wow, damn it, I've never seen such a great product in my life." Ran's clear eyes were filled with disgust. She frowned, looking straight at Lin, her voice cold as ice, "Get out of the way." Even in this situation, Ran frowned, but it didn't reduce her charming beauty. Like a wounded cat trying to act fierce to defend itself, it makes people want to tease it even more. Not only did Lin not retreat, he even took advantage of the situation. He completely ignored the discomfort in her eyes, reached out to grab her, and smiled viciously, "If we are so well matched, we can only use force. Today, even if I have to take you away, I will not let you say no." He was from the Lin family, a top family in this country, and even cooperated in business with Gu Jin's family. In this industry, not many people dared to touch the Lin family. A little girl like Ran was just a toy to him. She couldn't believe that Lin would dare to act so recklessly in the school grounds. She wanted to ask for help from the security guards, but their eyes only passed by as if they didn't see her, and they even turned away. It was as if these things had happened countless times, and they had become too familiar and indifferent. Lam pretended to cover her mouth, a vicious smile on his face. "Follow me obediently, to avoid physical suffering, okay? Go away." Neem stomped on his foot with all her might, then kicked him hard between the legs. A miserable scream rang out. Lam painfully let go, her face grimaced, her body bent over in pain. Several juniors hurriedly ran over, and when they saw Lam's appearance, they were shocked. "Catch this little girl for me." Neem Neem hugged her painful leg and ran away. Behind her was a group of boys shouting and cursing and chasing after her. She had only run a few steps when one of them grabbed her. The pain from her arm made her cry. Lam was helped up by the juniors, her face twisted with hatred, and she walked forward with the intention of tearing her clothes. Ko Tan held a cigarette between his lips. The Maybach stopped right in front of the campus. His deep black eyes saw the scene before him. The coldness in his eyes grew more and more. "You still won't stop?" Neem Neem's cry for help rang out weakly in the air. Immediately, the high-end Maybach rushed into the compound. The roar of the engine sounded as if it was tearing through the air. Ko Tan turned the steering wheel with one hand. The Maybach was like a ferocious beast, rushing straight into the protective fence. His black eyes swept over the crowd surrounding Neem Neem. The surrounding air seemed to freeze because of the danger. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel, making a cracking sound. "Very good. You dare to touch her." The loud collision made the men blocking Neem Neem's way turn around. "Damn it. Oh my God. Where did this crazy guy come from?" They were terrified as they watched the Maybach rush forward like crazy. No one dared to risk their lives. All of them ran away in all directions, as if they were trying their best to escape. The clumsy Lin didn't dare to stop. As soon as he was helped up, he cursed and tried to run away, his face full of terror. "Damn it, you crazy guy." Gu Jin stepped hard on the gas pedal, his hand lightly gliding over the steering wheel. His face was both crazy and cold. His lips were tightly pressed, the corners of his lips slightly curled into a cruel smile. The Maybach was like the king of hell, demanding lives, relentlessly chasing the men. A loud bang sounded, the leader Lin was hit, fresh blood spurted out, and he fell to the ground. The rest of them couldn't escape either, being hit one by this fierce car. The roaring sound of the engine was like a wild beast, terrifying. The Maybach rushed straight towards the girl. Everyone thought it would also madly hit her. But when it was only a short distance away, the car suddenly slowed down. In that moment, it was like a knight protecting a precious princess, both domineering and gentle. The car door slowly opened. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. The sunlight shone on his godlike face, every line exuding nobility and coldness, from the bones bringing a sense of majesty that made others tremble. Ran Ran stood there, stunned. The pain from her arm being pulled was still evident. Her big round eyes looked straight into the man's black eyes, with a hint of surprise in them. Since she was young, her parents had always asked her to solve all difficulties on her own. Even when she was in danger, she had never thought of relying on others, but this time, there seemed to be something different. However, this help was limited. They were inherently not equal. His choice of imprisonment had predetermined that they could not be in the same world. Never. Ko Tan walked towards her, his face cold, his sharp eyes scanned the marks on her body, the emotions in his eyes stirred with anger, the surrounding air seemed to freeze. "Baby, does it hurt?" The man bent down, his cold eyes looking straight at the little girl. That scary voice rarely carried a trace of gentleness. It hurts a lot." Neem Neem replied softly, her hand placed on her arm, where the wound was burning painfully as if it was being torn apart. As soon as he finished speaking, Ko Tan's eyes immediately froze, his face becoming colder than ever. He slightly curled his lips, smiled like a devil, and picked her up with one hand. He gently placed Neem Neem in the passenger seat, then stood in front of the car door, leaning his hands on both sides of the car. His deep eyes revealed a dangerous smile, his voice full of seduction. "Neem Neem, obediently wait here. Your husband will go take revenge." His gentle tone was like he was coaxing his little girlfriend, but immediately after, his murderous gaze erupted. He was like a wild beast, fierce and scary. Don't kill me. My father is an official. He definitely won't let you off." Lin coughed up blood and trembled as he retreated, fearfully crawling back. He still hadn't realized how dangerous a madman he had provoked. "Ah, so you're his only son. but unfortunately, he won't have a son any longer. Gu Jin curled his lips into a cold smile, his voice like a devil from hell. At the same time, the courtyard became terrifyingly silent. News: the official's only son was in a terrible accident this afternoon, seriously injured. Nim's face was pale, being carried back to the villa by Gu Jin, trembling non-stop. In the Maybach, she didn't dare say a word. Gu Jin's cold gaze seemed to drown everything, while he calmly recounted the story of how he turned around and ran over the man named Lam. On his face, the smile remained as if the lives of others were insignificant. As someone who always considered herself kind, even when bullied, she did not fight back. But when faced with real cruelty, she could only tremble in fear. The faint scent of tobacco emanated from the man, mixed with his low voice, leaving only fear in front of this madman. Don't be afraid, be good, today this matter is over, the son of the Tran family has met with disaster. Pausing for a moment, Gu Jin looked at Ran Ran in his arms, she was clearly frightened. His voice was both a warning and a comfort. Ran Ran, baby, as long as you obediently stay by my side, you will never become like them. Ran Ran will forever be fresh and full of life. Crazy! Ran Ran trembled with fear, her beautiful eyes filled with terror. Gu Jin, the man who was always cold, now rarely showed gentleness on his face. The sharp and domineering eyes now contained only greed as they looked at the little girl in his arms. His slender fingers gently brushed past her delicate eyebrows, as if wanting to engrave her into his heart, dissolving into every vein. After the horror of last night, Ran Ran finally couldn't bear it anymore, burst into tears and let out weak words of reproach. Crazy! Sick! Pervert! Gu Jin looked at the little girl who was weakly scolding him. Not only was she not angry, she even laughed. The doctor standing next to the bed was so scared that cold sweat ran down his back. He could only lower his head and beg the girl lying on the bed to stop talking. Don't scold our ancestors anymore. A group of top doctors in the medical field could only kneel down and beg her to stop scolding. After injecting the antipyretic, Gu Jin helped Ran Ran up, patiently feeding her small spoonfuls of porridge, and finally gently placed her back on the bed. His slender fingers playfully pinched her small chin, watching the girl obediently close her eyes and sigh. His deep voice was mixed with a hint of resentment. Wait until you get better, I will calculate the principal and interest and teach you a lesson. Dare to scold him as crazy, sick, perverted, and the first one. Nin's temperament was originally very good, but she could be cold as ice and hot-tempered at the same time. Baby! If you still don't behave, I will immediately throw all these people out. Gu Jin once again covered her with a blanket. He bent down, looked at the little kitten in his arms that had finally fallen asleep, and he let out an exhausted sigh. The little girl in his arms, sometimes called kitten, sometimes called baby, really made people suspect that he was sick. Gu Jin had just closed his eyes to rest, when he heard his obedient wife's weak voice. It hurts. Gu Jin said, do we need to throw this whiny goblin away? Nim was still scared, leaning on his arm. She just wanted to move when the pain came immediately. Pfft. Her beautiful face wrinkled in discomfort, she curled up even more. Gu Jin, after a tiring night because of the little girl, was awakened by her moans. He opened his eyes, pulled the blanket up. What's wrong with you? When he saw Nim was awake, looking at her painful appearance, Gu Jin's eyes darkened. He ordered in a low voice, bring the medicine box over here right now. Do you still hurt? After the injection, Nim obediently shook her head at the doctor. It doesn't hurt anymore, I'm fine. Get lost when you're done. Gu Jin coldly shouted at the doctor, his voice full of murderous intent. The doctor didn't dare to stay long, picked up the medicine box and ran away, afraid that if he slowed down a bit, he would be cleaned up by this man. After the injection, Nim weakly closed her eyes. But her small hand was tightly held by his strong hands. The pain made her open her eyes, facing his cold gaze. Nim. Don't let another man touch you again. Are you sick? Even the retired old doctor made him jealous, he was truly hopeless. The little girl's soft reproach, her tone was like she was acting spoiled, instantly calming the wild beast in his heart. Gu Jin didn't mind at all. In fact, being scolded by his wife made him feel comfortable, as if he had received a rare privilege. Be good, just scold me. Neem Neem opened her clear eyes wide, looking at him in surprise. A few days later, Gu Jin took care of her himself. She should have recovered after just a few days of rest, but he refused to let her go. He even transferred all the work to the villa. Even cooking for Neem Neem was done by him personally. Neem Neem looked at his delicate appearance, her beautiful face flushed. She just wanted to clench her teeth and say, I'm fine, I want to go to school. Gu Jin was still enjoying the pleasure of taking care of the kitten. Hearing her words, his deep eyes flashed with a hint of loss. He coaxed in a low voice, listen, take another day off. No. I'm really fine. In the face of her strong resistance, Gu Jin finally gave in and let her go. When she walked out of the villa, Neem Neem felt like she was breathing fresh air, feeling like she was finally alive again. She spread her arms wide, her beautiful face revealing a rare smile. After the past few days, the distance between her and that crazy man had grown even further. The little girl carried a cloth backpack on her back, walking into the school grounds, the gentle sunlight covering her petite figure, making her as beautiful as a watercolor painting. Little sister? A woman looked at the girl in front of her, her expression not very trusting, and asked. It was not until the girl's familiar face turned around that the woman was sure that it was her little sister. From the branded clothes she was wearing, to the backpack that was also a famous brand. Since getting married, she really made people both jealous and admiring. Sister, Ran Ran was a little surprised to see her older sister again. Ever since she married Gu Jin, she had never seen her older sister again. Every time her parents scolded her, her older sister would stand by her side to advise her. She had always thought that her older sister truly loved her. Little sister, since you got married, your parents often mentioned you. Every time you go home, you bring your brother-in-law with you. Since you are my little sister, your husband is also my brother-in-law. When Ran Ran goes home, of course she can't forget to bring her brother-in-law with her. The older sister looked at Ran Ran expectantly. Ran Ran, you must bring your brother-in-law back. But, sis. Gu Jin is basically. Alright, let's decide. I'll tell the maid to get ready. Mom and Dad will wait for you and your brother-in-law at home. Before Ran Ran could finish her sentence, the older sister turned around and left. Looking at her sister's hurried figure, Ran Ran lowered her head and hugged her bag, sighing helplessly. She couldn't let Gu Jin go home with her. With his sickly control, she was afraid something big would happen. Ran Ran was both nervous and a little expectant, and texted Gu Jin. I want to go back to visit my parents. Can I not go to the manor this time? Please, let me go. In the most famous skyscraper in the K country, the afternoon sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the man's sharp, angular face. His long, slender fingers slid across the phone screen, his thin lips curled into a wicked smile. Behave yourself. Looking at his message, Ran Ran's beautiful face flashed with anger. You hateful thing. When my transfer application is approved, I'll run away immediately. The evening light gradually fell, the sun shone on a splendid and prosperous city, the sky was dyed with red clouds like a scroll painting filled with beautiful beauty. The Maybach parked beside the garden gate. Ran Ran saw Gu Jin standing there. Looking at his figure, her beautiful face couldn't help but blush. Just consider it as being bitten by a dog. Gu Jin bit the cigarette at the corner of his lips, his sharp eyebrows locked onto the little girl standing in front of him. His thin lips slightly curled up, revealing a wicked smile. This obedient girl was the purest treasure in the world, doing everything with simplicity and innocence. His fingers lightly flicked the cigarette ash, his body lazily leaned against the car seat, his deep eyes attentively observing the little girl who was trying to resist him. Ran Ran, as long as you don't think about running away, everything can go your way. The little girl seemed to have made a decision. With a resigned look, she approached the Maybach. After being tormented, she gently opened the car door and sat in the passenger seat, her sweet smile like the bright sunlight. Ran Ran looked at the man in front of her, her body seemed to be filled with lead, without any strength left. In the sharp eyes of the man, there was no concealment of the sickly possessiveness towards the little girl. The thin lips curled into a cold smile, the Maybach turned around, and sped straight towards the manor. At the villa, the parents had already set a table full of delicious food, their carefully groomed faces filled with anticipation. Song Lianhua mumbled as she scooped rice, "Oh my God, marrying off a daughter is like pouring water out of a bowl. If you have wings, you can fly away, and no longer care about your parents. But you can't just joke around with your parents like that." Looking at the newly finished manicure, she still didn't forget to complain. As for her older sister, she continued to badmouth Ran Ran. At this moment, in the living room, the whole family was like idiots, still waiting. At the same time, the older sister, who had received a confirmation message from Ran Ran earlier, had completely lost her usual gentleness. That hateful girl. She had agreed to go home, just to see Gu Jin. In particular, she had spent the whole morning getting the makeup artist to prepare her, putting on her most beautiful dress. Damn it, Ran Ran, how dare you stand me up? The old text messages were still on the phone screen, the other party seemed to have disappeared, not replying at all. She angrily threw the tablet, standing in the middle of the living room, constantly insulting, no longer having any of the gentle image of a sister. Gu Jin carried the little girl back to the manor. In a daze, Ran Ran only vaguely remembered that she had agreed with her sister to visit her parents, so she tried to sit up even though she was lying on the soft bed. A pair of strong hands wrapped around her small waist, squeezing tightly, pulling her into her embrace. "Be good, that's enough for today, we're not going anywhere." "My sister. I already told you." Neem Neem raised her head, her sleepy eyes looking at the man beside her, her expression still filled with doubt. Why is it so good? What was this silly girl thinking? In the end, it took Gu Jin's coaxing and threatening to make her lie down. Late at night. The man in his home clothes, the cigarette in his hand emitting faint smoke that surrounded his angular face. His slender fingers slid across the phone, the screen lit up, then quickly turned off when he pressed answer. "Hello." His deep voice rang out through the receiver, and Ran Ran's sister, who had just cursed angrily, immediately lowered her voice and tried to act charming. "You. Brother-in-law, right? Should I call you brother-in-law or should I call you by your name?" The feeling of joy that had just been kicked away came back when she heard the man's voice. Her face turned red with embarrassment, and she bit her lips lightly, her voice extremely sweet. "Gu Jin." The man held the cigarette between his fingers, the embers flickering and then going out. In his deep eyes, there was nothing but coldness and contempt. "Change the way you call." Pausing for a moment, his sharp eyes swept across the surrounding darkness. His low, cold voice rang out, "If you don't have anything important to do in the future, it's best not to contact my wife. Anyway, not every cat or dog has the right to come back." After saying that, he bluntly hung up the phone. In his cold, contemptuous gaze, his thin lips curled into a sarcastic smile. He pulled out a nearby tissue and wiped the receiver as if he had just touched something dirty and disgusting. He clearly promised to take her back to visit her parents, but in the end, he brought her back to the manor. Thinking back to every word that man said, Ran Ran clenched her fists in anger, unable to help but curse under her breath. "My husband brought Ran Ran back, but Ran Ran already belongs to you." She clenched her fists, recalling the situation last night, her heart only growing more angry. "You crazy damn man. When my transfer application is approved, I will definitely run away. It's best if we never meet again." After finishing school, Ran Ran heard her older sister's voice again. She always said sweet words, her tone was very gentle. "Younger sister." The elder sister tried to hold back the urge to tear apart Ran Ran's beautiful face, forcing a stiff smile on her red-painted lips. "Gu Jin said it yesterday, there's no problem. Ran Ran, you must come today. Mom and Dad have prepared a lot of delicious food." Her slender fingers gently brushed the messy locks of hair behind her, her smile charming and enchanting. Ran Ran looked at her elder sister with a charming appearance, of course not missing the feminine way she addressed Gu Jin. Standing under the sunlight, Ran Ran's small hands clenched into fists. That crazy guy hasn't harmed me enough, now he wants to harm my older sister too. Recalling his ugly face, his beast-like appearance, especially his crazy actions, Ran Ran's delicate face became hard. No. Absolutely don't let him hurt my older sister. The sunset fell, red clouds spread across the deep blue sky, the evening light covered every corner of the garden, carrying the scent of fresh grass and trees. In the Maybach, Gu Jin tapped his bony fingers lightly on the steering wheel. The cigarette was between his lips, the thin smoke drifted across his angular face. The butterfly tattoo hidden on his neck further enhanced the mysterious and dangerous look. Today he would return to his wife's parents' house, with his little wife. Thinking of his sister's weak appearance and sweet voice, the corner of his mouth curled up into a contemptuous smile. Today, I must let Ran Ran realize a truth. In this world, who is the one who truly treats her well? Ran Ran stepped out from inside, seeing the arrogant Maybach parked in front of the door. Remembering Gu Jin's ugly and scary appearance, she bit her lip, then walked towards the car. As soon as he opened the door, a sweet scent that was characteristic of her immediately filled the space inside the car, rushing straight into Gu Jin's nose, shocking all his senses. Neem Neem was forever the most delicious thing in the world. Leaning his bony hands on the seats on both sides, a faint smoke swirling around him, he spoke in a low, attractive voice, "Don't move." The corner of the man's mouth curled up, he pulled her seatbelt and whispered in her ear, "Today, Neem Neem is not allowed to run away anymore." Pervert. Neem Neem's delicate face was flushed red, her big round eyes were full of anger as she stared at his noble face, but still had a majestic look that made others not dare to look at her. The Maybach slowly rolled, heading towards her parents' house. Inside the house, her parents had prepared a table full of exquisite dishes, smiling brightly, completely ignoring their daughter sitting in the front passenger seat. The older sister was even more excited when she saw the noble man in the car. Today, she was completely different from her usual appearance. A tight dress accentuated her perfect body, seductive but not losing her soft femininity. Today, I must seduce Gu Jin. As for Ran Ran, standing beside her, her sharp eyes followed her sister's every move, a warning bell constantly ringing in her heart, absolutely do not let Gu Jin harm her. The elder sister was truly deceived by the appearance of those hypocrites. Ran Ran held Gu Jin's arm, her gentle voice especially outstanding, "Hubby, are you hungry? Let's eat." The little girl gently called hubby, causing the emotions in Gu Jin's calm eyes to suddenly surge. His voice was low, "Good girl." Her adorable shy appearance made people unable to look away. Ran Ran, with her beautiful almond eyes, secretly glanced at the man. Standing beside her, the elder sister instantly became invisible, only able to watch the shameless Gu Jin immersed in love, unable to do anything. Hateful, hateful, hateful. Gu Jin swept his sharp eyes over, looked inside, and softly said, a little hungry." His low voice pressed against Ran Ran. Ran Ran was so scared that she trembled. Pervert. Chen Fengli, with an angry gaze, stared at Ran Ran's back, gritting her teeth as she walked over to stand beside her daughter. Despite her careful maintenance, her face still exuded a fierce look, like mother, like daughter. "It's okay, daughter. Remember, if I can snatch your father from a scoundrel, then you can definitely snatch Gu Jin from him." Chen Fengli, with her delicately made-up face, looked encouraging, she would definitely be able to catch a man. The mother and daughter entered the dining table and immediately changed their attitudes, their gentle faces blooming with smiles. At this moment, Gu Jin was serving food to his beloved wife. Ran Ran's bowl was already filled with food. She covered her face, hugging the bowl, her face puffed up like a rattle. "Too much. Too much." This bad guy wanted to fill her to death. Gu Jin slowly leaned closer, his voice extremely low. Good Ran Ran with her beautiful almond eyes, fiercely glared. The mother and daughter just turned around, seeing the scene before them, they were stunned. Chen Fengli pinched her daughter's arm. Wen Qing, with a face full of guilt, slowly walked closer to his wife and daughter. "Daughter. Pour wine for Gu Jin. Yes, Dad. The daughter, her hand had not yet touched the wine bottle, when Ran Ran's small hands suddenly rushed forward to grab it. Dad, let me. I'll pour it. Ran Ran was embarrassed, her eyes did not dare to look at her sister. In order to avoid Gu Jin being approached by her sister, today she had to pour wine no matter what. Gu Jin, with eyes full of interest, looked at the busy little girl. This action seemed a bit unusual, compared to a normal wife. In the villa, she always looked distant, but returning here, it seemed different. He raised the glass in his hand, the corner of his lips slightly raised. Jealous? Ran Ran did not reply. Looking at the smile that flashed across the corner of his lips, his eyes did not hide it, just staring intently at his little wife. Ran Ran glared, immediately filled the glass of wine for Gu Jin, then held the glass filled with wine towards him. Gu Jin's slender hands, with clear knuckles, received the glass of wine she handed over. He tilted his head back and drank the glass of wine, the liquid slowly flowing down his throat. Excuse me, I'm a bit drunk, so I should go back first. Gu Jin raised the glass, his sharp eyes staring at his little wife, his hoarse voice carrying a hint of alcohol. Okay. Ran Ran, you, help Gu Jin go back. Wenqing immediately stood up and signaled to Ran Ran, his appearance was so considerate that he almost helped Gu Jin himself. Alright, Ran Ran reluctantly stood up, walked to Gu Jin's side, let him put his arm around her shoulder, half of his body leaning against her. Ran Ran couldn't help but want to throw him to the ground, but in the end she held back, supporting him to walk out. When the two of them were out of sight, the daughter angrily made a scene. Dad, Mom. Ran Ran, she. Wenqing immediately gave her a warning look, the daughter pouted her lips in grievance, and sat back down at the dining table. What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on now? It was so hard to invite Gu Jin here, could it be that she was going to let that hateful person enjoy all the benefits? Son, I told you, you have to be calm in everything you do. Chen Fengli looked at her daughter with an unwilling expression, but still gently reassured her by her side. Gu Jin is definitely yours. Her eyes turned cold, in the past she could snatch Wenqing from another woman, then her daughter could definitely do the same. Ran Ran helped Gu Jin back to the room, just as he pushed the door open, the space that belonged to the little girl blew into his face. The drunk man suddenly sobered up, as if he had just regained control of the situation, his lazy appearance leaning against the doorframe. The room was filled with sweet breath, soft sheets were covered on the bed, and there were a few stuffed animals placed around. They were old, the fur was slightly faded. It turned out that Ran Ran always hugged them to sleep. Gu Jin scanned the small room, then turned around, pressing his little wife against the wall. His voice was deep and hoarse, the smell of alcohol wafting in, making people feel immersed in it. Baby, is this your room? Yes. As Gu Jin walked out in a bathrobe. Gu Jin. A girl's surprised cry came from behind. As he was about to open the refrigerator, the smile on the corner of his lips gradually disappeared, his handsome face turned cold, he turned around, his arrogant appearance with a bottle of water in his hand. Sister, why are you standing here? Are you so uncomfortable that you can't wait? The man's voice, in the dark night, seemed even more seductive than the darkness outside. The girl's heart seemed to be out of control. Standing in front of such an outstanding man, no girl could restrain herself. Gu Jin looked at the girl in front of him with interest, his lips curled into a contemptuous smile, 2 fingers still holding the bottle of water, his tall figure lazily leaning against the refrigerator. His voice was deep and hoarse, full of charm, but also dangerous. Sister, I don't lack women here. The contemptuous smile and each word clearly said, like knives stabbing straight into the other person's self-esteem. The girl was completely devastated, her carefully manicured fingernails digging into her palms, her delicate face filled with only ferocity and jealousy. Losing to that little brat again. What was she relying on? The hand with clear knuckles pushed open the little girl's bedroom door. The sweet space, filled with the breath of youth, flooded in, dispelling all the darkness. He placed the half-full bottle of water on the dressing table. At night, Gu Jin attentively looked at his sleeping little wife, his sharp eyebrows revealing a rare gentleness. This husband belongs to you alone for the rest of his life. So, Ran, never run away from your husband. Without you, your husband will go crazy. Ran tried to suppress her fear, her eyes shining as if containing the Milky Way. The reaction of her little wife made Gu Jin extremely satisfied, but at the same time, his face revealed an unpredictable and dangerous look. He gritted his teeth, pulling Ran in front of him. One of his hands was propped up on either side of her, the faint smoke surrounding them. Nim realized that she had probably angered this madman. She firmly held the view that a wise person does not suffer losses in front of him. She raised her head, her beautiful almond eyes sparkling as she looked at the man in front of her, her voice filled with grievance. Hoo, Nim really can't bear it. Really can't bear it. Her small hand was lifted up by his big hand, his sharp gaze stared into the girl's innocent, clear eyes, her lips pressed tightly together, then he spoke coldly, "Baby, can you act a little more fake?" His two arms were propped up on both sides of her body, his hot breath blowing around her, his deep voice filled with warning. Ran, I have to go abroad for a while, during this time you must be obedient. Don't do anything you shouldn't do. The domineering and dangerous words made her shiver, but in her eyes, the panic only flashed by. She tried to stay calm, looked up at him with sparkling eyes, her tone soft, "I will wait for you." That gentle voice eased the frustration in Gu Jin's heart. His sharp eyes looked at his little wife, the corners of his lips unconsciously curled up into a satisfied smile. Ran, if you're not obedient, your husband will break your legs. The deep voice sounded beside her ear. The little girl lying on the bed frowned slightly, turned around and ignored him. Not long after, the room gradually fell silent, the faint smell of cigarette smoke disappeared. The girl on the bed slowly opened her eyes, but the fear in her eyes gradually became clear. Chapter 5. You guys are responsible for picking her up safely. Yes, young master. Yes, young master. The engine roared, the man with an arrogant appearance leaned against the car, his eyes swept past the two people in front of him, the innate aura of a person in power strongly radiated. Ran is like a kite. If I let go, she will fly away with the wind. So the only way left is to cut the kite string, so she can obediently stay by my side. For this life, this lifetime. Ran sat in the car, looking out the window, her beautiful face flashed with doubt when facing the unfamiliar faces. Did Gu Jin send you guys to monitor me? Young master is worried about her safety, specially sent us to be in charge of picking her up. Worried about me? Or are you afraid I will run away? Ran smiled faintly, withdrawing her gaze. Meanwhile, Gu Jin had already arrived in his own car. In front of the villa, a group of men dressed in neat suits, with outstanding temperaments, were waiting. Among them, there was a man named Shen Yan, who had an elegant appearance standing beside him. His phoenix eyes contained a hint of coldness, the corners of his lips always curled up into a faint smile, carrying the demeanor of an elegant gentleman. Humph. He is truly very valuable, to the point that even a bunch of old men like us have to personally come and welcome him. A man with a big belly could not hide his disdain as he spoke. Uncle Song, don't say that, I'll treat you to a meal next time. You're still sensible, your daughter hasn't even married yet, so you have to take care of her. Several other men also laughed, their tone teasing. Shen Yan is so outstanding, which girl wouldn't be infatuated with him? The men standing at the pinnacle of power could not hide their admiration when looking at Tam Yen. A young man of this generation, who rose up and stood firmly in society, not only achieved outstanding results but was also humble and polite, making everyone respect him. The jokes quickly eased the tense atmosphere just now. When Gu Jin appeared, his arrogant appearance, cold face, but carrying the domineering aura of a person in power, exuding a terrifying danger. The pot-bellied man from earlier immediately became silent, not daring to act rashly. I've kept everyone waiting. Gu Jin nodded slightly, his cold eyes swept over everyone, then quickly went straight to the point. Everyone entered one by one, leaving only Shen Yan standing in the same place, his sharp phoenix eyes narrowed, as if hiding something behind his glasses. Butterflies are interesting. In a luxurious room covered in dim lights, a row of beautiful girls with graceful appearances stood in front of the men. The dim light shone on the girls' charming faces, mixed with the scent of high-class perfume, making the atmosphere in the private room filled with luxury and frivolity. "What kind of beauties does young Master Gu like?" The man in the lead held a glass of wine, smiled politely, and looked at the arrogant man leaning against the sofa. Gu Jin, leaning back on the high-class leather chair, with a comfortable yet no less arrogant posture, also raised his glass of wine in response, his voice low and magnetic. "Beauties are not a problem, tonight we just need to drink until we get drunk with you." "Very good. Then we won't be polite." The man laughed, raised his glass of wine and drank it all, then chose a charming girl for himself. The group of beauties standing in a row were initially stunned when they heard Gu Jin's words. They didn't expect that in such a luxurious gathering, there would be a man like him. And so handsome. A few girls looked disappointed but quickly found seats next to other powerful men. In the dim space, the scent of wine and perfume mixed together, the atmosphere was filled with intoxication and intoxication. Gu Jin gently shook the wine glass in his hand, his pitch-black eyes observing each powerful man in the room. Behind them were the despicable fake faces. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his lips. "Is there no beauty that catches young Master Gu's eye?" The dim light shone through Shenyan's glasses. His clean, slender hands were also gently shaking the glass of red wine, his expression still as gentle as usual, carrying a charming smile. "Oh? Young Master Shen doesn't have anyone by his side either? Could it be that like me, no one catches his eye?" Gu Jin drained his glass of wine, his face expressionless. "I'm afraid that young Master Gu will laugh at me, I don't like women." Shen Yan used his hand to cover his mouth as if he wanted to hide the smile that was curling up, and turned his gaze towards Gu Jin. His smile was still faint, distant but not lacking in elegance. This kind of demeanor was even more dangerous, like a sharp knife that didn't show any traces, but when it struck, it would take someone's life in an instant. Gu Jin raised his eyebrows, and lifted his wine glass towards Shen Yan. "It seems that young Master Shen's gaze is no different from mine." Shen Yan's deep gaze swept over the butterfly tattoo on Gu Jin's neck, his smile still unchanged. "That's right, there really is no difference." His words were gentle, but full of hidden meaning. After drinking for half a session, the girls in the room began to show their charm, and the atmosphere became thick with the smell of alcohol and perfume. Gu Jin frowned, feeling frustrated, and stood up and left the private room. Outside, the cold wind blew past, dispelling the intoxication. His sharp eyes looked into the distance, where thousands of city lights were shining brightly. However, in his mind, there was only Ran Ran's figure. Without a single conscience, not even a single text message, not even a single phone call. While the alcohol had not yet dissipated, he immediately took out his phone and called Ran Ran directly. On the other side, in another country, the clock had just struck 1 a.m. Ran Ran hung up without hesitation. The first time the call was hung up, Gu Jin frowned. This kind of feeling was really uncomfortable. If it wasn't for work, he really wanted to go back immediately, hug his little girl in his arms, and fall asleep. The second call rang. This time, Ran Ran frowned uncomfortably, picked up the phone, her voice gentle, but still carrying a bit of weariness. "Hello? Don't you miss your husband?" "I do." Ran Ran's lying voice was now so practiced that it didn't even require thinking. From the other end of the line, her gentle voice came through, causing the corners of Gu Jin's lips to curl up. "Good baby, wait for your husband to come back." When the little girl's steady breathing sounded, all the feelings of loneliness and frustration in the man's heart completely disappeared. She was his sedative. Without her, everything would be in chaos. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, shining on Ran Ran's small face. The little girl had just woken up, still holding the phone in her hand, her beautiful almond eyes filled with shock. "Why did I answer Gu Jin's phone call in the middle of the night like this?" The girl ran her hand through her hair, frantically recalling last night's conversation. "Damn it. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became." She grabbed the blanket and squeezed it tightly. As time passed, she became more and more nervous, afraid that at any moment her meticulous plan would be discovered by him. Just thinking about that prospect, her whole body couldn't help but tremble. At the same time, elsewhere, Gu Jin had finished his work. The man with sharp eyebrows stood in front of the negotiation table. The demeanor of an authoritative leader was fully revealed, causing everyone opposite to bow their heads in caution. No one could have expected that, under the leadership of this man, the company had overcome all obstacles and achieved resounding success. At the celebration party, the once arrogant men could only remain silent. Everyone secretly thought that this man was more terrifying than any of their imaginations. It was as if there was an invisible string controlling everything. As soon as that string broke, everything would explode into a terrifying storm. Young Master Gu, I heard that today's auction has a special item, a butterfly-shaped necklace encrusted with diamonds. The man at the head of the auction table glanced at the butterfly tattoo on Gu Jin's neck, daring to guess the dangerous man's preference. The butterfly. Xin Yan, who was still standing to the side, flashed behind his glasses. At the lavish auction, the well-dressed gentlemen took their seats one by one. Among them, two men stood out from the crowd. One had an arrogant and cold demeanor, the other was calm and elegant. When they sat down, all eyes were on the two of them. Each item was auctioned off one by one, but Gu Jin still maintained his leisurely appearance, his legs crossed, his eyes unconcerned. Ran Ran is still missing a necklace, perhaps she has already arrived home by now. Finally, when the MC's voice rang out, the most anticipated item, the butterfly necklace, appeared. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. The necklace was placed in a glass cabinet, so gorgeous that even from a distance one could see its sparkling light. It's barely worthy of Ran Ran. Begin the auction. 10 million. The first man raised his board, using a high price to cut off everyone else. 12 million. A gentle voice rang out, and immediately someone raised the price. Young Master Gu, do we need to stop? This item probably isn't that important. Of course there's no need to stop, let's compete fairly. The corner of Gu Jin's lips curled up slightly, and he raised his board to continue bidding. Xin Yan also smiled, a smile that carried the elegant demeanor of a young master. However, in a brief moment, a cold, blood-red smile flashed across the corner of his lips. That expression was so quick that no one noticed it. 15 million. Gu Jin continued to raise the price, his tone still calm. 20 million. Xin Yan did not hesitate, raising the price higher. Gu Jin immediately followed suit, without hesitation raising the price. All eyes in the auction room were now focused on the two of them. This diamond necklace was clearly not something that could be bought easily, but these two outstanding men seemed to be fighting not only for it but also for their own stubbornness and arrogance. 100 million. Gu Jin's low, cold voice rang out as he continued to raise the board. The entire auditorium suddenly fell silent, everyone took a deep breath in surprise. Some people couldn't even sit still, standing up to watch this breathtaking auction. Xin Yan's sharp eyes behind his glasses slightly narrowed, the corners of his lips still held a polite smile, but in his heart he was determined, this necklace must belong to me, and so must that girl. Just as he was about to raise the board again, a man walked over and whispered something into his ear. Xin Yan was momentarily stunned, the elegant smile on his face instantly froze. His hand gripped the number plate so tightly that it bent. Then, he threw the plate down, turned his head and smiled meaningfully at Gu Jin. Congratulations, young Master Gu. His sharp eyes flashed, and then his figure gradually disappeared from the auditorium. Gu Jin was still sitting there leisurely, his legs crossed, his eyes never leaving the butterfly necklace. This necklace, and that person, are all mine. After the auction, in a large room with dim lighting, Xin Yan's handsome face no longer maintained its usual elegance. His voice became cold and sharp. Is the information correct? It has been confirmed. Xin Yan stood by the window, looking at the night view of the city. His eyes turned cold, and the corners of his lips curled up into a dangerous smile. She finally appeared. But can what happened before be repeated? Maybe she has forgotten, or even married. A worried female voice rang out from behind, brother. A girl with a delicate face stepped out from the darkness, her eyes filled with tension as she looked at him. Is that news certain? Yes. Xin Yan closed her eyes, her voice returning to its usual calmness. No matter what happens, I will still make sure that everything will not change. If she is married, then let her be married. If she is pregnant, then abort the child. The girl was stunned, her eyes filled with fear and surprise as she looked at the older brother she had always respected. Xin Yan raised his hand, gently brushing away the girl's messy hair. Xin Yurua, you will forever be my little sister. The smile on his lips was polite and distant, making people feel both scared and suffocated. The moonlight shone through the hem of his shirt, the butterfly shape on his arm and the dark swayed slightly, as if wanting to fly up with a gentle movement. The time has finally come, this time we will never be apart again. On the flight back to K Country, the plane gradually disappeared behind the clouds. The dark night covered the sky. In the passenger cabin, Gu Jin was twisting the butterfly necklace that sparkled under the light. On the other end of the line, Ran Ran habitually picked up Gu Jin's phone and called. She gently closed her eyes, placed the phone to her ear, her voice still a bit dreamy from sleepiness, extremely soft. Hello. Ran Ran, your husband is on his way back. Do you miss him? The man's sharp eyes suddenly softened, his handsome face also became softer, thanks to the charming voice from the other side of the phone. A wild beast bound by chains, but that beast willingly let the chains hold it. A week later. Neem Neem rubbed her eyes and looked at the dimly lit sky, yawning deeply, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. It's only been a week? How did he come back so quickly? The car slowly approached, Neem Neem frowned and unwillingly waited. You hateful thing, calling every night, making me panic every time I look at the call history, afraid that I might say something I shouldn't have said in my sleep. Thinking of this, Neem Neem finally felt the joy of being able to escape that tortured night. On her delicate face finally appeared a relieved smile as she looked at the gradually brightening sky. Pretty sister, buy me a bouquet of flowers. A childish voice rang out from behind. Neem Neem felt someone pulling on her shirt. She bent down at the call, and saw a little girl as tall as her waist, her eyes wide open, shining with shyness. In her arms she held a few wrapped bouquets of flowers, her eyes filled with anticipation as she looked at her. Neem Neem felt a little heartbroken to see such a small child wandering around selling flowers. She sat down, her voice gentle. What kind of flowers do you have? Sunflowers, 10 dong a bunch. I'll buy a bunch of sunflowers. Neem Neem gave the little girl a 100 dong note, stopping her from giving back the change. For the rest, help me give a few bouquets to someone. Realizing that her beautiful older sister had bought all her flowers, the little girl's eyebrows lit up with joy, the corners of her mouth curled into an innocent and pure smile, looking so adorable that others couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I wish you and your boyfriend a happy life together. The little girl finished speaking and then hugged the remaining bouquet of flowers and skipped away, leaving Ran Ran standing there in a daze. What boyfriend, just cursing me. Gu Jin saw his little wife from afar, her pretty face was wrinkled like a bitter melon, her eyebrows were also furrowed. He gradually walked closer, his sharp eyes like an eagle stopped on the bouquet of sunflowers she was holding in her arms, his handsome face gradually became gentle, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. How nice. The sky gradually brightened, the sun slowly emerged through the clouds. The sunlight shone down on his shoulders and back, like a wild animal being chained tighter and tighter, but he seemed willing to let the chain hold him back. Gu Jin walked in front of her, slightly bent down and snapped his fingers, the sunlight gently shone on half of his face. The sharp eyes of the man at this moment contained only her. Neem Neem, your husband has returned, he is a very good baby. While still in a daze, Neem Neem was startled by the low voice that suddenly rang out beside her ear, she almost fell. A large hand quickly caught her. A hoarse but gentle voice rang out, idiot. Neem Neem relied on the strength of his hand to stand firm, pouting as she looked at the man in a neat suit in front of her. From head to toe, he exuded the maturity and charm of a grown man. However, Why did such a perfect person always stubbornly cling to her? Ko Tan reached out and flicked his little wife's forehead. His bony hand snatched the sunflower bouquet from her hand and held it in his arms. Neem Neem was already too familiar with this domineering action of his. Ko Tan lifted the bouquet to look at it, his voice mixed with a hint of teasing. So ugly. If it's ugly, give it back. Neem Neem reached out to snatch it back. She didn't intend to give it to him in the first place. A low laugh rang out beside her ear, his big arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her into his embrace. Gu Jin leaned down, whispering in her ear, as long as it's Neem Neem giving it, no matter how ugly it is, my husband will like it. You'll accept poison? Neem Neem asked with a pout. His face suddenly became serious, the smile at the corner of his mouth became more dangerous. He tightened his grip on her waist, his voice resounding each word, as long as it's Neem Neem giving it, I'll accept it all. Returning to the villa, Neem Neem went to her room to rest. At this moment, the gentle smile on Gu Jin's face disappeared. He leaned back on the genuine leather chair, his legs crossed, his hand placed under his chin, his eyes turned cold. The driver assigned to pick Neem Neem up and down respectfully reported all of her whereabouts. Gu Jin's cold gaze gradually dissipated, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Ran Ran was indeed very obedient. His jet-black eyes stopped on the sunflowers, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, as if he was recalling something, his eyes filled with infatuation. She still belongs to me. He placed the bouquet in the vase, his slender fingertips gently brushing over each petal, a hint of madness and possessiveness flashed in his eyes. Ran Ran placed the bowl of noodles that had just been cooked on the dining table. The maid said that Gu Jin had a habit of wanting to eat a bowl of noodles first every time he returned from a business trip. He pushed open the bedroom door, the space was empty, not a single familiar figure. Gu Jin's eyebrows immediately furrowed, the fear, stubbornness, and madness in his eyes surged. Where is she? The maid was so frightened by his aura that she trembled, and quickly pointed at the dining table, stuttering. Mississippi in the dining room. Almost immediately, the tension in his heart eased. The wild beast bound by the chain seemed to loosen up a little. Arriving at the dining room, through the glass, he saw her familiar petite figure. Under the morning sunlight, her natural beauty without makeup seemed to make people hold their breath. Even each strand of hair exuded a gentleness, she was like an angel, saving him from the chaos in his heart. Gu Jin pushed the door open and entered. Ran Ran turned her head to look at him, her sweet voice rang out, every time you come back from a business trip, you eat noodles, I've already cooked it. Before she could finish her sentence, his strong hand pulled her into his embrace. He hugged her so tightly that he wanted to fuse her into his bones, to engrave her into his life. Ran Ran, promise me, to stay by my side forever, okay? Ran Ran was hugged so tightly that she couldn't breathe, she lightly punched his back. What are you crazy about again? Gu Jin let her go, but seeing the red mark on her neck from being hugged too tightly, his eyes darkened even more. He pulled her hand, led her to the chair, and poured her a glass of water. When she recovered, Ran Ran pushed the bowl of noodles that had been cooked towards him, trying to keep a smile. All right, eat, it must be delicious. While eating, Gu Jin's posture was still full of nobility, even when eating a simple bowl of noodles, he exuded an arrogant aura. However, even after finishing the bowl of noodles, he still didn't receive a reply from her. Ah! Ran Ran was lifted up by him without having time to dodge, causing her to scream in surprise. When she reached the stairs, she suddenly thought of something, her mischievous eyes flashed with light, the corner of her mouth curled into a secret smile. Have. Period. Menstruation. It's here. As expected, after the announcement, the domineering guy revealed a distorted expression. Gu Jin looked at the little wife in his arms, who was trying to hold back her laughter until her stomach hurt, gritting her teeth and saying, "Don't laugh." Until a low voice rang out beside his ears, the girl in his arms immediately stopped laughing. Ran Ran. Ran. The night was dark, her sharp eyes filled with sickness. Ran Ran, after you graduate, we will have a child, let it carry our bloodline. Ran Ran was still too young, she was worried and scared, her heart was always filled with confusion. But she didn't dare to resist, because this man was truly crazy. Without thinking any further, the girl closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembling slightly. This sick and stubborn man still wouldn't let go. After all this time of being imprisoned, she still couldn't escape? At that time, would he still want to keep her and her child imprisoned together? No matter how beautiful the iron cage was, it was still just an iron cage in the end, let alone a crazy man like him. Who knew when he would get excited, and then? That was the reason why she only dared to quietly submit a request to leave. As for the children, it was completely impossible. The dawn filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the two of them. Gu Jin looked at the little wife in his arms, who was sleeping soundly, his long fingers gently drawing lines on her delicate face. It was as if it was deeply engraved into her bones, merging into her flesh and blood. Neem Neem opened her eyes, and suddenly met his deep black eyes like an abyss. Neem Neem was frightened, almost reflexively jumping up. "What are you doing here?" Gu Jin leaned on his elbows, tilted his head to look at his panicking little wife, his deep eyes revealed a faint smile. His voice was low, like the sound of a stringed instrument in the morning sun. Neem Neem was stunned, stammering, "I still have my period, it's not over yet." The low laughter echoed in the room. Gu Jin laughed so much that his eyes seemed to shine, his voice was slightly hoarse, "I'll take you out to play today." The little cat in his arms suddenly felt like its fur was about to bristle, its delicate face was full of protest. "No. What the hell is this crazy guy trying to do again?" Half an hour later. Ran Ran stood in the amusement park, looking at the children laughing and playing happily around her, her beautiful almond eyes filled with surprise. "Take me out, to the amusement park?" Gu Jin looked at the little wife beside her with amusement, just gently wrapped her arms around her waist, pulled her into his embrace, and gently tapped her forehead. "Of course, where do you think I'll take you?" Ran Ran immediately covered her bright eyes, afraid that she would hear something that would surprise her even more. After all, there was no place to dig a hole here. Gu Jin took her little hand, placed it on her lips, and kissed it, then led her straight through the VIP entrance. Ran Ran was just like that, pulled by Gu Jin, attracting countless admiring and jealous gazes, completely becoming the center of attention. "What do you want to play?" Gu Jin looked in the direction she pointed, couldn't help but frown, the veins on his forehead popped out. The crazy spin with the ear-piercing scream, the speed gradually increased, making even the heart tremble. Too dangerous, definitely scared. Ran Ran turned her head to look over, her beautiful almond eyes flashed with excitement, as if she had just discovered a new continent. "Gu Jin, are you scared too?" Having been exposed by his little wife, Gu Jin calmly replied, "Too dangerous, no way." Ran Ran refused to give up, her almond eyes were shining brightly, without a trace of fear. It turned out that this crazy guy also knew fear. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for revenge, how could she miss it? She immediately grabbed his hand, shook it and coaxed, "Just play it once. It's okay, these devices have all been thoroughly checked by experts." No. Being rejected again, Ran Ran was not discouraged at all, on the contrary, it was as if she had found something interesting, her almond eyes lit up. "Ha, you're scared, right?" Being laughed at by his little wife, Gu Jin raised his head to look at the spinning wheel in the air, his Adam's apple moved slightly, he raised his eyebrows and tilted his head, his sharp eyes were full of vigilance. "Just once." Before Ran Ran could laugh happily, she was frightened by his stern eyes, and was pulled to the seating area. It wasn't until the staff checked one last time that she came back to her senses. Ah. Beside her, the spinning wheel kept accelerating and freely fell from the air. Ran Ran excitedly shouted from beginning to end, without stopping. Gu Jin tilted his head to look at his lively little wife, his eyes revealing a smile, his hands clenched tightly, not letting go. As a former skydiving enthusiast who broke records, how could he be afraid? He was just worried that Ran Ran would remember the unpleasant things. His lips curled up slightly, his smile revealing a bit of pampering mixed with worry. "Ran Ran, are you scared?" "A little." When it came to the most exciting part, she was so nervous that her hands were clenched tightly, her knuckles were white. Gu Jin laughed, gently comforting her. Don't be scared, my husband is here. The single people sitting behind immediately showed their dissatisfaction. You hateful couple. Ran Ran sat down with her legs weak, her voice hoarse from shouting too much. Meanwhile, Gu Jin didn't even frown once from beginning to end. How annoying, why did he think this crazy guy would be scared? He should have been scared. Wait. Gu Jin, sweat still dripping from his forehead, under the bright sunlight, quickly walked towards the juice stand, holding a glass of cold watermelon in his hand and disappeared into the crowd. Ran Ran looked in the direction he left, feeling strange. It wasn't until Gu Jin turned back, holding 2 glasses of cold watermelon juice in his hand, placing them on the empty chair in front of him, that the corner of his lips curled up into a smile. This amusement park was invested by him, and every corner was equipped with surveillance cameras. Moreover, before entering here, she had been checked and couldn't leave without a locator bracelet. His fingers gently stroked the bracelet, his expression pensive. Ran Ran, never do anything to disappoint your husband. Gu Jin stared intently at the bustling crowd, each of them wearing a bright smile. Some people were attracted by his beauty, but when his cold eyes looked back, they were immediately frightened by his icy aura. Gu Jin. Just as he was about to pick up the walkie-talkie and seal off the park, his little wife's sweet voice rang out. Like a drowning little fish suddenly swimming into the vast ocean, he raised his head, his eyes still filled with a sense of tension that had not dissipated. Ran 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 over with an excessively large cotton candy in her hand, the smile on her face gradually stiffening as she saw his cold smile. Gu Jin's black eyes stopped on the cotton candy, his Adam's apple moved slightly, the tension in his eyes softened, his lips curled up slightly. So it turned out to be buying cotton candy. You're very good, you didn't run away. In just a few steps, he was standing beside Ran Ran, blocking the bright sunlight, looking down at his little wife with a voice like smoke. Don't get lost. Ran Ran raised the cotton candy in her hand in front of him, pouting. You treat me like a child again. That's right, in my eyes, my Ran Ran will always be a child. His slender fingers gently wiped the corner of her lips that were slightly sticky with sugar, his deep voice like a captivating melody, making people intoxicated. Ran Ran, only children eat cotton candy. When they were young, children always heard their parents say, "You're an adult now." That forced them to take care of everything on their own. Now, a domineering man suddenly entered her life, sealed everything around him, and now said that she would forever be a child. Ran Ran looked up at him, her eyes filled with contradictions. His gaze was like an abyss, but at the same time, it also contained intense possessiveness. If only they could be like normal couples, Ran Ran laughed bitterly. Unfortunately, there was no if. She took a bite of cotton candy, the sweetness melted in her mouth, somewhat dispelling the strange feeling that had just arisen. Gu Jin wrapped his arms around her waist, led her to a cooler place, and handed her a glass of watermelon juice. Thirsty? Under the attentive gazes of the people around her, Ran Ran raised the cotton candy to cover her face. Her eyes were sparkling, as if there were stars flashing by, and the corners of her lips were still covered with a bit of sugar, even sweeter than the cotton candy. Gu Jin looked at her, the smile on her lips deepening. But as soon as she realized his intentions, she quickly stood up and tried to run away. Unfortunately, he had already predicted her actions. Ran Ran was so embarrassed that she could only use the cotton candy to cover the other half of her face. Gu Jin smiled brightly, wiped the sugar off her lips, and then let go. The corners of his mouth curved up, carrying a sly smile, very sweet. Gu Jin led his little wife into an amusement park, a haunted house. Want to play? I'm so scared, those ghosts are so terrifying. Before she could prepare herself, Ran Ran was grabbed by Gu Jin's hand with distinct joints and pulled into the haunted house. Gu Jin, I'm really a bit scared. It was pitch black inside, visibility was limited, and nothing could be seen clearly. There were only creepy sounds, ghostly screams, the sound of iron chains, continuously hitting her eardrums. When a ghost suddenly appeared in front of her, Ran Ran was completely panicked. Don't be afraid. His strong hand tightly grasped her hand, the corners of his lips filled with a smile. He pulled her into his arms, his eyes in the darkness revealing calmness, but also exuding fear. What are ghosts? They're not as scary as me. Moreover, he had even played the role of a ghost before. On the way, thanks to Gu Jin's overwhelming aura, no ghosts dared to appear. Ran Ran's initial fear gradually disappeared. She also gradually became more courageous, but unexpectedly, as soon as she opened her eyes, a female ghost was staring at her. Ah! Ran screamed. Directly facing her fear, she almost fainted. Gu Jin's voice was low and cold as he looked at the female ghost who suddenly appeared, sternly shouting, "Get lost." The poor female ghost's face was full of tears. Hoo, so scary. I've never seen a man in my life who dares to fight a ghost one-on-one like this. No matter what Gu Jin did, Ran refused to open her eyes again. Instead, she was like a little octopus, clinging tightly to him. Gu Jin, let's go out, it's not fun in here at all. With his little wife's wholehearted support, a faint smile appeared on Gu Jin's handsome face. He gently patted her back. Hold me tight, your husband will take you out. Ran finally felt at ease, snuggling tightly into his arms, as if the world only had the two of them left. In the dark space, Gu Jin's tall figure walked forward step by step. In his arms was the petite girl, and he himself, in the quiet night, exuded a cold and terrifying aura that was perhaps even more terrifying than the ghosts in the haunted house. From then on, no ghost dared to come near them. Open your eyes, there won't be any more. Really? Ran kept her eyes tightly closed, her head nestled in Gu Jin's arms like an ostrich. This sister is really brave. A group of children burst out laughing mockingly. Ran shyly opened her eyes, her mouth muttering, I'm scared too. Gu Jin looked at his little wife muttering to herself, the corners of his lips curling up. He turned to the children with the look of an older brother, smiled and said, Big sister is very brave, actually it's not scary in there at all. The children who were hesitating, hearing this, seeing his determined gaze, immediately believed him. When all the children had entered, Gu Jin curled his lips, slowly turned around and said to the person in charge, Take good care of them. The person in charge held the walkie-talkie, bowed his head and replied, Understood. Then immediately mobilized all the ghosts in the haunted house, shouting loudly, All the ghosts, scare them for me. The children who were timid before, now screamed miserably and crazily when scared. All of them ran away in all directions. Ran stood outside watching, her expression both helpless and amused. Gu Jin pulled his wife's hand, bent down so that his eyes were level with hers, and softly coaxed, Ran is the bravest. In the end, Ran still chose to give in. After all, if she angered him, the only one who would suffer would be herself. A hero shouldn't try to endure losses. After all, she was living with a madman. Gu Jin leaned over, his sharp eyes full of dominance facing her, the corners of his mouth slightly curved up gently. Ran, call me husband? Ran turned his face away, deliberately showing an arrogant and indifferent appearance. Gu Jin smiled, his large hand placed on her soft fur bag. His deep and magnetic voice rang out beside her ear. With matters of principle, sometimes a little bit of anger would also strengthen the relationship. He knew very well how to coax. As a result, Ran was led by Gu Jin onto the giant Ferris wheel. As they waited for their turn, the scenery in the park had already begun to change. The park was brightly lit, and people dressed as cartoon characters began to march. This park was originally considered a top-notch amusement park, with all kinds of entertainment. Many people were curious about the boss behind the scenes, thinking that he must be a person with a rich imagination to have created such a magical place. And now, the boss behind the scenes was holding his head in pain because of a group of children. Little friend, you can't participate in this game. The sign clearly says that you must be 12 years old to enter. The female employee on duty pointed at the board with the rules, her voice gentle and accompanied by a polite smile. You bad sister. I want to tell Dad to destroy this game. The child couldn't stand it anymore, and immediately rolled on the ground and threw a tantrum. He screamed loudly, attracting the attention of the people around him. The female employee looked embarrassed, her eyes looking at Gu Jin for help. However, he only turned his back coldly. Just as Gu Jin was about to signal the security guard to take the child out, Yan Yan suddenly appeared beside the child. She sat down, smiled slightly, and said softly, "Little friend, what's the most interesting thing about this place?" The naughty boy raised his head, saw the beautiful older sister, immediately became a little more obedient, then suddenly shook his head madly. He pointed at the girl who had just spoken, shouting, "Get out of the way, this place is mine." The waiter standing next to him, silently said nothing. The boy continued shouting, "Financial freedom. I can even buy cows and horses." Ran Ran smiled gently at the boy, "Okay, then you can play." The boy looked at the beautiful older sister, mouth agape, completely at a loss for words, as if possessed by a demon. He blurted out, "You are my wife." The man beside him, Gu Jin, frowned. He coldly said, "Wife? Are you joking? Now I will throw the brat who dares to dream about my wife into the trash can." Holding his strong hand tightly, Gu Jin pulled Ran Ran into his arms. His low voice seemed to have the power to make others afraid. "If you do that again next time, I guarantee you won't live in peace." The man was already scary, even those with many years of experience were afraid, let alone this naughty boy. The boy was immediately frightened to tears, tears flowing like a stream. Whether it was real or fake, he only knew that the tears just kept falling. The mother standing beside saw her child being bullied, so she quickly picked her child up, her sharp eyes looking at Gu Jin as if she wanted to eat him alive. But when facing his cold eyes, the scolding words she was about to say were swallowed back. She could only say a worthless sentence, "Your mouth is really poisonous, you definitely won't be able to have a wife in this life." Ran Ran pulled Gu Jin's arm, avoiding him and his mother. Their children had a conflict. But the smile on her face could not be hidden. Gu Jin originally wanted to respond, but when his eyes looked into her gentle eyes, his strong hand softened, only pulling her closer. At night, the girl's smile lit up, clear and flawless, like the sparkling starry sky, distant but full of charm. Gu Jin pulled his wife into his arms, lowered his head to gently pinch her nose, his low voice filled with love. "Is it that funny?" Ran Ran nodded, but did not dare to laugh out loud, could only hold back his laughter, frantically shaking the handbag in his hand. Gu Jin was worried that she would make him dizzy, so he used his cold hand to hold the bag, leaned over slightly, their eyes met. He said, "Those words will never come true, because you are already my wife." Ran Ran suddenly laughed, but quickly held back. Really, he was just a domineering man, there was no way to make people stop laughing. However, that smile soon faded, as if turning into embarrassment. Gu Jin saw the smile on the corner of his wife's lips gradually disappear, his face showing a look of satisfied victory. That feeling was very similar to a child who had just won an argument. Of course, in the end, Gu Jin did not let go of punishing his wife. Ran Ran was pulled onto the giant Ferris wheel by Gu Jin. When the cabin started moving, they reached the highest point, where they could see the entire beautiful scenery below. Ran Ran curiously pressed herself against the glass, her sparkling eyes seemed to contain the whole world. Gu Jin looked at his girl, her deep gaze filled with gentleness. He quietly used his phone to capture that most beautiful moment. In the picture, the scenery was majestic, but that girl was the only beauty he saw. As long as she was there, this world would have no other color but brilliance. Ran Ran looked down at the scenery below that gradually changed, from the bright lights to the starry sky. She gradually revealed a sad expression. This time she left, she probably wouldn't know when she would be able to return. Maybe she wouldn't have another chance in this life. Suppressing her sadness to the bottom of her heart, she felt Gu Jin's strong hand holding hers. Ran Ran looked into his deep eyes. "Gu Jin, this is the highest place." His gaze was so intense that she had to avoid it. But Gu Jin didn't give her a chance, pulling her into his embrace. In the Ferris wheel cabin, the handsome man placed a sincere kiss on the lips of the girl in his arms. Behind them, brilliant fireworks bloomed in the sky. Under the fireworks, the cheers of the crowd below rang out, like a happy song for them. Kissing at the highest place, they engraved their eternity. But he was even more greedy, not only wanting eternity in the present, but also hoping that they would be together forever through each life. Ran, for this life, and for the next, you are mine. The Maybach slowly entered the manor. The handsome man carried the petite girl down from the passenger seat. After playing all day, Ran was tired, and it started to drizzle outside. Gu Jin carried her, the sparkling lights shining on his face, creating a perfect scene. Inside, the assistant shouted like crazy, "President Gu, we have signed a contract with a partner." The team had been working overtime for many days to win this supplier. If successful, the Gu group would reach a new peak. The assistant was so excited that he forgot all about manners, but when he realized who he was talking to, he stood up straight, not daring to be careless. "Yes, the entire team will get an extra bonus." His calm voice carried no emotion, but it was enough to make the assistant jump with excitement. The Gu Group was one of the largest corporations in Country K. Its business fields were everywhere, making people unable to help but respect it. Although working at the Gu Group was very hard, the salary and bonus were numbers that ordinary people would not dare to dream of in their entire lives. No one could imagine that the man who held everything in his hands, possessing a huge amount of assets, would make others both respect and fear him like this. Gu Jin held the girl in his arms, his eyes filled with infatuation, to the point of being almost sick. Ran, you are truly the greatest blessing in my life. Chapter 6. Ran sent Gu Jin's driver away. She had never felt so peaceful. She placed both hands on her chest, as if she could feel her heart beating strongly. The pain was suffocating. She walked into a convenience store and bought a bottle of cold water. The cool sweetness flowed down her throat, temporarily suppressing the anxiety in her heart. Today was the last day of the review. As long as it was approved, she could officially go abroad. This was her only chance to escape from Gu Jin, to escape from his terrifying obsession, which had almost reached a pathological level. Today was the last time, and also the last chance for her to leave him. Suppressing all the emotions in her heart, Nim walked straight to the office of the lecturer in charge. "Congratulations Nim, you're about to go abroad." The lecturer smiled brightly, handing her the final approval form. Nim took the form, feeling like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. She tried to tighten her grip, controlling her trembling, completing all the information that needed to be filled in on the form, then carefully checking to make sure there were no mistakes before submitting it back to the lecturer. "Teacher, please help me keep it a secret this time." The lecturer looked at her sincere and pleading eyes, a little confused, but still smiled and nodded in agreement. This matter was not easy. Going abroad was good news. Moreover, this time she was an excellent case, and many expenses were exempted. After saying goodbye to the lecturer, Nim did not return to class, but wandered aimlessly around the campus. Under the sunlight, she looked up at the clear blue sky, the gentle wind blew, blowing through the strands of hair fluttering against her cheeks. Nim's lips curled into a relieved smile. The night was getting late. The Maybach drove straight towards the manor. "Why didn't you let me stay?" Ran's delicate face slightly wrinkled. She couldn't understand this domineering man. "I didn't let you stay, we're going home." Gu Jin controlled the steering wheel with one hand. The mysterious butterfly tattoo on her neck became clearer under the light. Her voice was emotionless. Ran felt helpless, looked at him a few times, finally could only turn away, leaning her head on her bag. If looks could kill, then Gu Jin would have been stabbed into 1,000 holes by her. Gu Jin gently pushed his tongue up to his upper jaw, didn't say anything more, still focused on driving, and turned directly onto the road leading to the manor. His arms were propped up on both sides of the seat, darkness enveloped them, his deep voice echoed in the narrow space. The Maybach slowly entered the manor. Gu Jin's passionate gaze seemed to cover the entire space. Tonight, he drove Ran back to visit her parents. Tran Fuanlu looked at her daughter, nodding in satisfaction. After talking about something with her husband, she returned with a haughty yet gentle appearance. "If you look closely, the dress she wore today is similar to Ran's, also a knee-length dress, without any elaborate patterns. Even her makeup is pale. Other than the fact that her facial features are not identical, there is almost no difference." During that entire process, Gu Jin did not pay any attention to his older sister. From beginning to end, his eyes were only on his wife. Ran Ran has always been his everything, even if he had to hold her hand for the rest of his life, he would never feel satisfied. The older sister hid the jealousy in the depths of her eyes, smiled gently, and pulled Ran Ran's hand. Gu Jin's sharp gaze followed his wife's hand that was grabbed, and a terrifying pressure seemed to radiate from him. Gu Jin, what are you trying to do again? Ran Ran felt pain and wanted to pull her hand back, but it seemed like she was being held down and couldn't move. Gu Jin's deep eyes looked at her, and he took a towel and carefully wiped the place that his sister had just touched. His voice was low, but full of pressure. Be good, it's dirty. Let your husband clean it for you. From now on, other than your husband, you can't let anything else like cats, dogs, or cats touch you anymore. Ran Ran didn't understand what was going on, but she still let him carefully wipe her hand. She felt wronged, but she could only endure it. Her sister naturally understood that Gu Jin was referring to her. In an instant, a feeling of anger rose in her heart. But instead of being embarrassed, she was even more hurt. Right now, no matter how angry she was, she couldn't do anything. Damn it. She thought that if she could, she wanted to tear everything apart, including Neem Neem. Ko Tan held Neem Neem's hand that had been wiped clean, leading her straight inside. Little sister. As soon as Neem Neem turned around because she heard her older sister calling, Gu Tan's mocking voice rang out, "Don't you have legs? Go over there yourself." Inside the house, the dishes were already prepared. When Tran Fuangle saw Ko Tan, her eyes lit up. She didn't dare to pull Ko Tan's hand, she could only pull Neem Neem's hand. But as soon as she touched her daughter's hand, the cold gaze from Ko Tan behind her made her pull her hand back. Nan Neem was surprised, because normally her mother always maintained an indifferent attitude towards her, but today she took the initiative to be so close. Nan Neem, your parents miss you so much, come sit here. Tran Fuangle smiled gently, not daring to pull Neem Neem anymore, only using her eyes to signal her to sit next to her. It was rare for her mother to show such friendliness. Neem Neem didn't refuse. Although her mother had always been cold since she was young, she was still her mother, and she didn't know when she would return this time. She obediently sat down next to her mother. Gu Jin naturally sat right next to his wife. When the two of them were seated, Chen Fengli and her sister's eyes unconsciously passed each other. On the table, each person had a glass of wine, and the main dish, steak, was placed in front of them. Under the lights and the wonderful atmosphere, no one refused this meal. Ran Ran held the glass of wine, looking at Gu Jin, to ask for permission to drink a little. Gu Jin also raised the glass, two slender fingers gently grasped the stem of the glass, swirling the dark red liquid. Each sip of wine passed through his throat, causing his Adam's apple to move slightly. The dinner ended, the atmosphere was very harmonious, even a bright smile appeared on Ran Ran's face. When she stood up to leave, her hand was suddenly grabbed. Gu Jin leaned over, his low voice, mixed with the strong smell of wine, "Lean on me." Ran Ran was a little confused, but in front of everyone, she didn't want to appear cold to Gu Jin, so she took his arm and walked together. "Are you drunk?" She helped him down on the chair, looking at him doubtfully. There was a bit of disbelief in her clear eyes. He did the same thing last time, but what about the result? Gu Jin didn't answer, just leaned his head on her shoulder, his soft hair falling down to cover his sharp eyes. Ran Ran looked down, a little surprised. Really drunk? Having only drunk one glass of wine, she found it hard to believe. Gu Jin, let me get you another glass. After saying that, she walked away. But when she had just poured a glass of wine, a woman's voice rang out from behind her, "Ran Ran." Turning around, Ran Ran saw her mother, Mrs. Tran Fuangle, wearing a silk robe. Although she was old, she was still very well kept. In her hand she also held a glass of wine, her eyes looking at her full of surprise. "Mom." Tran Fuangle put the wine glass on the table, hurriedly pulling Neem Neem's hand. Her eyes were slightly wet, her voice carried emotion. "Neem Neem, I miss you so much. Can I talk to you alone for a moment?" Neem Neem had never seen her mother so close before. This sudden intimacy made her a little confused, but also evoked a feeling of longing. Seeing her mother's expectant gaze, Neem Neem nodded. "Okay, wait a moment, I'll tell someone to take care of Ko Tan." let the maid take care of it. Tran Huanglu quickly took the wine glass from Nim Nim's hand, signaling to the maid. The maid received her instructions, immediately walked over to take the wine glass, smiled and said to Nim Nim, "Miss, let us take care of these things. Please take some time to chat with the boss, since you got married, the boss has been mentioning you." Nim Nim glanced back at her mother, a little hesitant, but still nodded in agreement, yes. Just waiting for Nim Nim to agree, Tran Huanglu was overjoyed, immediately pulling her hand and walking inside. The two gradually disappeared into the darkness. From a hidden corner, the older sister walked out, smiling schemingly. "From today on, Gu Jin will be mine." She snatched the glass of wine from the maid's hand, then calmly walked towards Nim Nim. In the living room, Gu Jin was still closing his eyes, his breathing was a little chaotic, his body exuded an unstable air. When he heard footsteps approaching, he opened his eyes, his sharp pupils flashing. He saw a girl in a thin dress, slowly approaching. The older sister deliberately changed her voice, gently saying, "Gu Jin, wake up." She reached out to support him, her eyes infatuatedly admiring his handsome face. Tonight, she had decided to be with him, no matter the cost. That glass of wine had been tampered with, and today, she deliberately dressed exactly like Ran Ran, to deceive him. Ran Ran would not come back this time. Today, let her detoxify. The girl with infatuated eyes reached out to touch Gu Jin. But when her hand reached mid-air, it was held back by a strong hand like a pair of pliers. The man who had just been lying motionless, now had a completely clear mind. He lowered his eyes, his gaze as sharp as a cold knife, as if he wanted to stab straight into the heart of the person in front of him. Impossible. How? How could this be? The girl looked at his cold, murderous eyes in fear, her red lipstick lips trembling, even the surrounding air became terrifying. Impossible, absolutely impossible. She had clearly seen him drink that glass of wine, how could he be unharmed? Gu Jin slowly stood up, his cold eyes staring at the girl, as if she was nothing more than trash. The black butterfly tattooed on his neck only added to his terrifying appearance. If he couldn't even handle this kind of cheap trick, he wouldn't be worthy of the reputation of being the most ruthless person. The elder sister's face was pale at this moment, her whole body trembling non-stop, as if fear had invaded her soul. Gu. Before she could finish speaking, Gu Jin snapped his fingers. Her terrified eyes glanced over, then her whole body began to tremble even more violently when she saw a group of people entering through the door. The small room was instantly filled. The leather shoes stepped on the wooden floor, the steady sound like a terrifying summoning, getting closer and closer to her. Gu Jin's eyes were still cold as he looked at her, while another man bowed his head respectfully and handed the glass of wine from earlier to him. "Drink it all." "No, I was wrong, I won't dare again." Before she could finish speaking, the man beside her had already tightly clamped her mouth and poured the glass of wine straight into it. She didn't have time to cry for help, she could only struggle helplessly, tears falling non-stop. At first, she only thought that Gu Jin loved Ran Ran too much, thinking that the rumors about him were all baseless jealousy. But now, she realized the truth was much more horrifying. Ever since Gu Jin decided to marry Ran Ran, all the rumors were not enough to describe how terrifying he was. Ran Ran was a rein that tied a wild beast. But if that rope was cut, it would only make the wild beast even more terrifying. The glass of wine was already empty. Gu Jin's cold eyes didn't carry any warmth, his tightly pursed lips curled up with murderous intent. He ordered, "Take good care of her. You can't treat Nim Nim's sister like that." The girl's desperate voice was buried in the night. After sending Nim Nim home, Tran Huanglu quickly returned to her room, carefully closing the door. She had arranged for all the servants to leave. Now, there was only one thought in her heart, waiting for good news from her daughter. As long as she had a child in her belly soon, she could easily pull that fox out of Khotan's arms. Under the morning light, the clock on the table flashed with a metallic light. A strong hand with long fingers tapped each key on the keyboard. From inside the room, Tran Huangli's crazy screams came from the phone. Khotan frowned, his eyes were cold, his face sank like a storm. "Are you done?" On the other end of the line, the voice seemed to be muffled, barely able to make small sounds. Gu Jin curled his lips, his smile carrying a hint of coldness. "Mrs. Chen, if you don't want the whole world to know about your daughter's matter, then it's best to keep quiet, pretend nothing happened. Furthermore, if Ran leaves," the smile on the man's lips became increasingly terrifying, "then not only will she be left alone, but everyone will also suffer the same fate." The recordings were erased. Gu Jin put the device back to its original position. Everything seemed like it had never happened. Only Chen Fengli, who was lying in the hospital gasping for breath, completely understood what true cruelty was. A wild beast. Chapter 7. Ninim packed her things and was taken to the villa by the driver. Only when the car stopped inside the apartment did the luxury car leave. She looked around and turned into a hidden corner. Actually, she had asked her homeroom teacher for leave today, because today was the day for her to carry out her plan. In Nim's backpack were important personal documents that she had secretly obtained. Last night, in addition to visiting her parents, she also returned to get her passport. At a rented apartment, a girl with a delicate face was preparing everything. Her goal was very clear: escape. Nim begged the driver to drive as fast as possible. After paying, she quickly entered the ticket inspection area. Along the way, passers-by looked at the girl with curious eyes. The ticket inspector was an ordinary man, but even when he was doing the inspection according to the correct procedure, Nim still couldn't help but feel nervous. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed. Her eyes kept looking around, afraid that Gu Jin would suddenly appear and take her back. The fear had been deeply ingrained in her mind, making every second that passed heavy. Finally, when the announcement to board the plane rang, Ran tightened her grip on the cloth bag in her hand, quickly following the crowd into the boarding gate area. She was only one step away from escaping this place. Everything will be fine. It must be fine. Ran whispered to herself to calm herself down, her hand tightly gripping the strap of her bag, anxiously waiting in the long line. When she was about to step through the boarding gate, the siren sounded, breaking the silence of the entire area. Ran immediately tensed up, her heart felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. A series of luxury cars arrived one after another, completely surrounding the area. In front of the overly grand scene, the people around were all stunned and stood still, not daring to move. Ran immediately recognized the familiar Maybach in the middle of the convoy. Her delicate face was pale, her heart was pounding violently with fear. She took a deep breath, tried to calm herself down, forced a smile, and said to the staff in front, "Please, can you be a little faster?" Cold sweat had soaked her back. This was her last chance. If Gu Jin caught her, she didn't dare imagine what kind of hell she would be imprisoned in. The ticket inspector, a gentle-looking middle-aged man, noticed that the young girl in front of her was too nervous, so he smiled lightly to reassure her. "Don't be afraid, everything will be fine." Ran hurriedly followed behind him, her heart pounding. But when the shrill sound of the car horn sounded, she turned her head involuntarily. The shiny black Maybach approached without any rules, just like its owner, powerful, arrogant, making everyone bow their heads. Ran felt her heart stop beating, her breathing was also blocked. Dense fear enveloped her, making her almost unable to move. From the luxury cars, a series of men in neat black suits stepped down. They quickly lined up in two neat rows, their postures straight like the army, creating an extremely large pressure on the surrounding air. The leader bowed respectfully and opened the door of the Maybach. An arrogant man stepped out. In an instant, all those neat men seemed to have turned into the background. Gu Jin, like a king, just standing there made others kneel in submission. The hazy cigarette smoke covered his sharp face, but his eyes were like blazing red fire, carrying a deadly danger. The butterfly tattooed on his neck further enhanced the dark and terrifying look. "Behave, I almost let you escape." From the financial support list of the Gu Group, he discovered his treasure. This time, Ran really tried her best to escape from him. Gu Jin smiled, but that smile made others shiver. He waved his hand and ordered, "Bring the criminal here." "No. Impossible." The airport staff were confused by the sudden appearance of this group of powerful people. A tall man, wearing a staff name tag, stepped out from behind the security guards, looking as if he was in control of the entire situation. "Excuse me, is someone trespassing on Mr. Gu's private property?" Gu Jin stepped into the cabin, his sharp eyes scanning every corner. "Search." The bodyguards immediately took action, checking from top to bottom, but found no trace of Ran Ran. The entire cabin became strangely quiet. "Mr. Gu, no, she couldn't be found." "Yeah. My Ran Ran has always been very smart. She must have hidden herself very well." The smile on Gu Jin's lips became more and more terrifying, like a bottomless abyss that made others tremble. "There's still one place left to search." Hearing this, the bodyguards looked at each other in surprise. They had searched the entire place. They only saw Gu Jin smile slightly, walking step by step towards one direction. End of episode 1. Please listen to the next episode next time. If you like the channel, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel to hear more interesting stories.